crows circle above as a pink-haired rogue lies wounded on the ground.
The rogue questions if they had lost consciousness while gasping for air.
Staring at their sword, the rogue wonders how long they were out and what became of the battle.
He clenches his fist with renewed determination as energy begins to swirl around him.
A painful cough sounds as he realizes several of his ribs are broken. Taking a sharp breath, the rogue resolves that he is still able to move. Purple orbs of energy drift over a desolate wasteland littered with the fallen.
An elf with a green-feathered collar lies unmoving against a blood-stained wall.
A giant stone skull exhales a thick mist over the crumbling ruins of the battlefield.
A white-haired ally is pinned beneath the heavy debris of a collapsed archmare. Monstrous undead warriors surround a priest in orange robes as he stands his ground.
The priest stares back at the encroaching darkness with a grim and steady gaze.
The massive demon lord looms over the orange-haired hero with a glowing pink blade. The demon lord prepares to unleash his ultimate authority upon his enemies.
The hero braces himself as a powerful wind kicks up around his heavy armor. Whipping currents of energy surge violently across the red-stained sky. A shadowy hand reaches out from a dark explosion as the ground shatters.
The demon lord commands his undead army to rise from the smoke and rebel. The rogue is struck with horror at the sight of the growing legion of the dead. He pulls on his skull mask, realizing the enemy had been concealing immense power.
From behind his mask, the rogue calls out to the priest.
Holding a severed helm, the priest acknowledges the rogue's arrival.
The rogue urges his ally to activate a special authority immediately.
The priest beseeches the Enlightened One to grant them divine power.
He activates the authority of light to allow the rogue to ignore his physical pain. A blinding impact erupts as the rogue charges back into the center of the fight. Moving with supernatural speed, the rogue maneuvers upside down with his dual swords.
He narrowly evades a massive purple energy strike that tears through the earth. A brilliant flare of white light consumes the vision of everyone nearby. Searing beams of energy slice through the ranks of the undead soldiers.
The rogue tells his allies to leave the remaining enemies tame.
He gives a final command for the hero to advance toward the main target.
The orange-haired hero raises a glowing blade as his allies cheer him on.
The demon lord hoists his massive pink greatsword for a world-ending strike.
Dark energy crackles across the sky as the two forces prepare to collide. The hero leaps through the air, his silhouette framed against a blood-red sun.
He parries the giant pink blade with a flash of brilliant white light.
The demon lord swings his weapon downward with overwhelming, crushing force. Their blades meet in a catastrophic clash that sends shockwaves through the canyon.
The intensity of the impact causes the very air to appear as if it is shattering.
A massive crater opens up beneath them as the ground gives way to the pressure. Dark, jagged veins of energy reach out to ensnare the hero midair. The hero drives his sword forward, aiming for a gap in the demon lord's armor. A direct hit causes the demon lord's rocky exterior to crack and splinter. A massive plume of dust and smoke billows out from the point of contact. The hero stands small but defiant before the towering, armored form of his foe. He addresses the demon lord with a cold and focused intensity. Suddenly, thick purple tendrils of energy lash out and wrap around the hero's body. The demon lord warns that the cycle of violence will never end.
The hero demands to know if the monster is planning to destroy itself to take them all down.
A sudden shout interrupts the demon lord. The rogue asks what they are doing as the orange-haired hero stares in shock.
A powerful strike forces the demon lord to release his grip.
The monster's eyes narrow while the rogue commands his ally to follow her.
A high-pitched ringing accompanies a desperate cry for the rout.
A vibrant pulse of energy forms against the pale sky. A dark ripple spreads across the surface of a swirling void. A massive pillar of darkness pierces the sky above the fallen hero. Lightning crackles as the gargantuan shadow dominates the horizon.
The priest demands to know the nature of the overwhelming black pillar of light.
A figure stands amidst a sudden whistling wind.
The orange-haired hero calls out to the rogue and expresses relief at his safety before being struck by a sudden realization.
A glowing void appears in the center of the shadowy silhouette's chest.
The rogue stands small but resolute before the towering demon lord.
The demon lord reflects on the weight of fate and the succession he witnessed. Reaching out, the demon lord asks if a meaningful death was squandered after all. A heavy blow shatters the demon lord's armored face. A loud wham sounds as the orange-haired hero delivers a powerful kick.
The demon lord is stunned that his opponent survived as the rogue's fractured mask reveals his glowing purple eyes.
The monster wonders if his foe possesses the same legendary power as he prepares to crush him.
A declaration about the right to receive succession echoes as the rogue struggles against the pressure.
Letting out a guttural roar, the rogue signals that the time to strike has arrived. The priest invokes the authority of light as divine energy and powers his companion. A sacred power focuses in the hero's eyes as he prepares the drawing of the sacred sword.
Charging forward, the hero invokes the evil-slaying sword Ascalon to deliver a devastating strike.
A sharp slash sounds as the demon lord's limb is severed by the glowing blade. A deafening boom echoes as the massive entity is driven into the earth. Sprinting toward his companions, the priest urgently asks if they are both all right.
The orange-haired hero calls out to the priest, who replies with profound gratitude for their survival.
The hero's attention is taken by a sudden gasp as he looks at the fallen robe. Looking down, the hero notes the state of the rogue's body and asks in disbelief if it has regenerated. The Demon Lord finds clarity in his final moments while the trio regroups. Scanning the ruins, the hero asks if the Demon Lord is still alive.
A low, chilling rumble sounds as the dying monster tells the hero not to worry.
Admitting his role is finished, the Demon Lord's form begins to crumble into dust.
The Demon Lord acknowledges his defeat and tells the survivors that this is their victory.
Fine cracks spread across the Demon Lord's mask as his physical shell fails.
Only a shattered helm remains as the monster delivers his final message.
Looking toward the survivors, the fading entity declares that it is now their turn.
The Demon Lord warns that they will be forced to make countless choices and face a despair greater than his own.
A lingering thought warns of the crushing weight of the responsibilities they must now carry.
In a final gesture of prayer, the Demon Lord's remains begin to vanish into the wind.
A final command to pray echoes as the last of his presence fades. From a distance, the survivors are urged to keep moving forward without stopping. The fading face contrasts the survivors with the foolish and naive nature of his own past.
The clouds part as a brilliant sun shines over the quiet battlefield.
Nothing remains of the towering foe but a faint trail of smoke.
Silence returns as the last of the debris settles on the barren ground.
The three survivors stand together amidst the desolate expanse of their victory.
The hero and the priest look down at their fallen friend as the world becomes still.
The great battle finally ends.
Tired feet walk upon the road.
Crowds cheer for the victorious heroes.
Banners flutter under a clear sky.
The white-haired mage is Dractaware.
The elf sets off for home.
The priest leaves the secular world.
The hero stands in somber reflection.
A golden crown is the start.
The new king raises his scepter.
A scarred girl smiles in relief. Fear is banished from daily lives.
Long years of peace follow.
A shadowy figure rests in silence.
The rogue declares he is continuing.
Benlir has lived for over a century.
He notes how the landscape changed. Only the stars in Ben-Lyra remain.
He reflects on the world's shift.
Silence follows thoughts of his curse. He reflects on his eternal burden.
Benlir questions the purpose of immortality.
He wonders what his meaning is.
A shooting star crosses the sky.
A girl finds the resting rogue.
Purple light glows within the lask.
Ben-Lyra watches the girl Kirch.
Her blue eyes widen in surprise.
They face each other in nest.
Tower Village sits on the outskirts.
The village rests behind the mountains.
The blonde girl asks if you've a kid.
Ben-Lyra wonders why a child is out so late before gasping as she grabs him.
Her eyes sparkle with intense curiosity.
The girl pulls at his mask.
Ben-Lyra commands the gun to stop.
Ben-Lyra notes she is the first child ever to poke at him.
He asks if she was taught to flee non-humans. She explains she was taught not to judge by looks, which Ben-Lyra acknowledges.
Ben-Lyra laments having his emotional moment interrupted by a weird kid.
The girl asks what he is and if his sword makes him a knight.
Ben-Lyra claims he is an imperial messenger guarding the mountain with his demon sword.
The girl assumes a messenger of the emperor must be incredibly strong.
Ben-Lyra explains that his prestigious role requires knowing high-level magic like necromancy.
A sudden squeak sounds as he revives a dead squirrel with his power.
The girl is amazed by his strength, but he reminds her he is not a mister.
The girl begs to be a student so she can get stronger, leaving Ben-Lyra shocked.
Ben-Lyra chuckles to himself, admitting he was getting bored with his routine.
Ben-Lyra flatly refuses to take a student, claiming it is far too much trouble.
The girl throws a tantrum, calling him a heartless skeleton as he shakes in.
Ben-Lyra informs the blonde girl that he is not a mister. Ben-Lyra rests against a large tree while birds chirp in the distance.
A sudden, sharp scream sounds as the girl delivers a powerful kick to the resting skeleton.
Ben-Lyra asks why the girl isn't heading home, but she refuses to leave until he teaches her swordsmanship.
Urging her to return before her parents worry, Ben-Lyra admits his skeletal appearance often leads to being mistaken for a child-kidnapping monster.
Waving a stick, the girl tells him not to worry about his appearance. Her childhood home burned to the ground and her parents died in a fire.
She recalls her mother's advice that she must become strong to survive on her own.
She declares her fierce determination to get stronger. She asks if Ben-Lyra understands her nation.
Ben-Lyra reflects on the warrior he once was.
Ben-Lyra lets out a long and weary sigh.
Ben-Lyra agrees to teach her the sword, leaving the girl ecstatic.
He notes it would be improper for a lady to refuse a child, shocking the girl with the revelation that he is a woman.
The girl cheers for her victory while Ben-Lyra remains silent.
As the child practices, Ben-Lyra reflects on the great trials his people have faced.
A joyful shout echoes as Ben-Lyra commits to teaching the child how to stand alone.
He views this training as atonement for failing to deliver a past message. Ben-Lyra easily parries the girl's frantic stick-stacks.
Exhausted from training, the girl rests beside her teacher under the tree.
Ben-Lyra summons pink shadowy monsters to provide a challenge for his student.
Panicked screams sound as the girl flees from the pink beasts.
Ben-Lyra is taken aback when the girl suddenly charges back into the fray with dual blades.
The duo practices making scary faces and acting like monsters together.
A traveling man with a backpack is horrified to stumble upon the pair in the bushes.
The traveler faints from shock as the girl cries out in alarm.
Time passes as the teacher and student rest together under their favorite tree. A quiet and gentle moment of bonding passes between them.
Now older, the student spars against Ben-Lyra with vastly improved skill.
The blonde student swings her training sword with intense focus.
Years of training pass in a blur of clashing wooden blades.
The older blonde student delivers a powerful downward strike.
Benlira and his student share a competitive and joyful exchange during their duel.
11 years pass as a silhouette swims in a peaceful wake.
Benlira catches a rabbit for dinner and calls out to his student.
Emerging from the water, the blonde woman promises to help immediately.
A pot bubbles over the campfire as the woman addresses the skeletal warrior.
She informs Benlira that she has something serious to discuss.
Benlira is surprised by her sudden change to a serious gown.
She reveals that her former village recently vanished.
Monsters drove everyone out after the Empire abandoned the frontier villages.
She laments that everyone is losing hope for the future. She looks at her hands and notes that she has finally grown strong.
Benlira asks if she intends to become a hero.
Having taught her for over a decade, Benlira claims he can read her thoughts perfectly. He recounts a friend who wanted to be a hero even when others said it was impossible. The blonde student listens with deep emotion and a slight blush. She remains quiet, gripping her spoon and bowl with resolve.
Benlira pulls out a short sword to present to his beloved student. He holds the ornate weapon aloft as a gift for her journey.
Benlira commands her to return safely.
The blonde student cheers with joy.
Benlira asks about the coming curse.
The woman admits her journey takes time.
Benlira vows to Garbalang. He trusts the child will return.
A quiet promise to wait follows. A brief but meaningful encounter ends.
Solitude returns without the old fear.
A quiet, rhythmic tap sounds as time passes.
Benlira jokingly corrects a greeting.
The bloodied blonde woman greets her master as he reflects on how long it has been since their parting.
Benlira stares at his student in silence.
The scarred woman smiles at her master.
They laugh despite her missing leg.
The blonde woman recounts the vastness of the empire and the endless new sights she witnessed while traveling.
She explains how she spent her life helping others using the skills her master taught her.
A soft sigh sounds as she recounts being called a hero while the emperor viewed her as a nuisance and ordered her execution.
Staggering forward, the woman is pulled into a tight embrace.
A sharp gasp escapes her as she apologizes to her master for feeling dizzy.
Gasping for breath, she asks if he missed her and playfully wonders if he cried while she was aware.
Clinging to his cloak, her voice weakens as she asks to finally hear his story.
A heavy silence settles the tween. A purple light ignites in the last. Sharp metallic rings echo during a battle. An armored knight complains about climbing the mountain to find the hero while his leader commands silence and another knight apologizes. Spotting a silhouette, the knight shouts for the stranger to leave the mountain before they get in the way.
Benlira questions the mention of a mountain while purple energy gathers in his hands.
Benlira stands ready with his glowing sword.
Benlira's eye focuses with deadly intent.
A wet crunch sounds as he strikes.
Benlira explains that 120 years ago he discovered remnants of the demon army during his time as an imperial messenger.
He describes the gruesome destruction of the enemy corpses as purple mist rises from a fallen knight.
A sudden rustle sounds as he explains how the forest grew over the buried monster remains.
He admits to guarding the burial site.
Benlira declares there is no more need to guard the mountain as his undead army swarms the knights.
The knight orders his men to form ranks as he strikes down a purple beast. Clutching his bloodied shoulder, the knight argues that a necromancer's control is limited regardless of the number of corpses available.
The knight suggests they simply wait out the magic.
A terrifying swarm of spirits fills the air.
Panicked screams echo as the scene fades. The lead knight wonders at the terrifying power of an army-creating necromancer and asks the warrior's identity.
The dying knight repeats his final question.
A massive shockwave severs them that time. Benlira prepares to give his answer.
The skeletal warrior holds his massive sword.
He reveals his true status as messenger.
Benlira raises his glowing pink blade.
A deafening crack sounds as the earth shudders.
Benlira commands the imperial citizens to listen.
A young boy looks out his window in confusion.
Thunder crashes as he asks what is happening.
A decree warns the empire against straying from its founder.
A shadowy purple hand grips the mountainside.
An army of shadows rises to correct the empire.
A dark silhouette commands the purple horde.
Benlira stands atop a mountain of bones.
A tattered banner burns with a strange sickle.
The void consumes a weeping skull.
A final warning demands payment for tyranny.
A survivor flees through the grass, gasping loudly. Smoke rises from the distant besieged village. Reaching toward home, the survivor cries out for the village.
Spotting reinforcements, he believes they are finally saved.
The relief vanishes as a knight is brutally slain.
Purple wraiths swarm the remaining imperial knights.
A frantic report identifies undead at the southern outskirts. A knight's eye widens while ordering standby units to assemble.
The knight says sunflower as the floating entity replies roasted potato. A massive explosion erupts as purple giants roam the streets.
The knights realize this is far beyond simple necromancy.
A literal army of shadows charges through the fire.
A commander tells everyone to get back from the silhouette.
The black-haired man prepares a specialized Joan-style scans.
Determination burns in the imperial knight's eyes.
A clean strike severs a shadow beast's tech.
He leaps across rooftops, unleashing a wolf hunt strike.
A sharp breath escapes his lips during the fight.
The knight stands tall amidst the dissipating shadows. Official Imperial Knight Escher Soma questions the necromancer's identity. A colossus of purple shadow towers over the village. Escher Soma points and identifies his primary target. The shadowy giant bellows a terrifying, earth-shaking roar.
The giant holds the tiny necromancer in its con.
Escher Soma notes the mage is strangely on the front lines. He prepares a counterattack with his massive blade. Using Done style, he slices through multiple shadow eggs.
Escher Soma surprises the necromancer with a high-speed leak.
He initiates a technique known as the wolf cod. A massive strike hits the giant's hand, creating sparks. Shadowy soldiers are vaporized by the knight's power. Benlira notes the impossible angle of the leg-severing slash. A faint memory surfaces of a bloodied, fallen comrade. Pink energy ignites within Benlira's hollow mask. A pillar of dark energy pierces the reddened sky. Benlira's gaze sharpens with an intense pink glow.
Escher Soma charges forward with a fierce battle cry.
Their blades clash in a flurry of sparks and speed. Benlira blocks the strike, forcing a grunt from Escher Soma. The knight pushes forward, refusing to yield the ground. Escher Soma and Benlira clash fiercely. The knight swings his massive blade. A powerful downward strike misses Benlira. Sparks fly as their weapons collide. Looking at his leg, Escher Soma exclaims in pain as his limb is struck. The two warriors trade violent blows. Benlira's skull mask looms in sirens. A brutal physical impact sends Escher Soma staggering backward as shockwaves ripple through the air. Benlira grips his purple hilton sword. A massive blade severs the ground. Blinding light erupts from the strike. The skeletal warrior watches as a part.
Benlira lands softly on the brick rooftops while Escher Soma struggles to maintain his footing.
Blood drips from Escher Soma's mouth as he gasps for air and curses the monster before him. Wiping blood from his face with a smirk, Escher Soma remarks that it has been a long time since anyone pushed him this hard, then asks the skeletal warrior what he actually is. Standing tall amidst the smoke, Benlira simply identifies himself as a vengeful Bilis. Breathing heavily, Escher Soma thinks to himself that he needs to stall for more time and wonders if he should continue provoking his enemy. Letting out a mocking laugh, Escher Soma questions the idea of a vengeful ghost and asks whose revenge the skeletal warrior is even seeking. Looking up at the black silhouette, Escher Soma continues his mockery by stating that they have killed so many people he wouldn't even know who Benlira is talking about. Escher Soma slumps against the stone as the narrative notes that using necromancy requires a massive amount of stamina. As Escher Soma's hand twitches, he thinks that if he keeps stalling and waits for that specific moment, it will be over before suddenly calling out to get Benlira's attention. Benlira's skeletal hand reaches forward quickly. A purple light flashes as Benlira seizes Escher Soma's head with a cold and lethal grip. A low growl sounds as Benlira begins to speak about the Imperial citizens and the petty things they value. Pressing his fingers into the knight's face, Benlira continues to lament how much was sacrificed for such a worthless power.
Benlira looms over his Kakinaplane.
Escher Soma grinds his teeth in agony. The skeletal hand crushes the knight's cop. Benlira kicks the knight away effortlessly.
Escher Soma is slammed into a stone structure which shatters into pieces upon the violent impact.
From the rubble, Escher Soma spits out blood and tells the monster to just keep whining as much as he wants.
Escher Soma looks up with a defiant, bloodied grin, claiming that everything was done for the Empire's greater cause and that those deaths were simply necessary. Staring down at him, Benlira calls the man a ridiculous bastard and declares that the knight's death by his hand today is also a necessity. Slumped against the broken wall, Escher Soma offers a final apology before his tone shifts to one of triumph. A massive beam of blue energy pierces the sky from the center of the mountain city. Benlira reels back in sudden shock. The blue pillar of light intensifies. Across the entire village, multiple pillars of blue light erupt simultaneously, painting the red sky with a cold glow. Deep within the mountain, a report confirms that barrier magic relay devices have been installed at every point and that the magic circuit stabilization is confirmed. A mage observes as the 155 magic batteries are successfully connected, announcing that the anti-undead protection barrier is finally ready to activate while hands reach through the grates below. Escher Soma grins through his bloody teeth, declaring that the mission is finally complete. A massive shockwave of blue energy explodes across the landscape as the command is given to activate the anti-undead protection barrier. The blue wave consumes the village. Ethereal purple monsters shriek as they begin to dissolve into the bright blue light. A shadow creature is brutally vaporized. Imperial knights stand ready as the purple mists and shadow soldiers around them crumble into dust. A knight raises his weapon in triumph, shouting out with joy that the undead are finally disappearing. Wiping his mouth, Escher Soma taunts Benlira by pointing out that his entire undead army has just been destroyed.
As blue sparks of magic begin to crackle across Benlira's body, Escher Soma warns that no matter how strong he is, he won't last long within the barrier.
Looking at the dissolving energy around him, Benlira simply replies that he already knows. The pale warrior's expression tightens in the shadows. Escher Soma stares up in confused silence from the ground.
Benlira declares that the loss of his army is irrelevant because he can simply raise a new one from the enemies the knight has already slain.
The necromancer explains that the exploited citizens of the Empire will provide the ranks for his vengeful force.
An ethereal spirit glows with haunting white light. He promises that these souls will join him in seeking revenge.
The dark screen warns the knight to prepare for their arrival. Pink energy flares within the warrior's hollow as.
A final decree promises the total destruction of the Empire. A group of 5 heroes walk together, reflecting on their shared hatred of war.
They remember the brutal days when killing was a necessity and death was a common occurrence. The orange-haired hero is celebrated by a cheering crowd, believing they had finally ended the cycle of violence.
The memory of their victory begins to fracture and break.
A small figure walks across a cracked white landscape. The collage of heroes shatters as they wonder if their fighting was meaningless and if the future they bought was worth the countless lives lost.
A lone traveler treks toward a distant glowing horizon. The small skull warrior questions what he was truly feeling on the battlefield in the past. He wonders who exactly he was fighting for during those years.
In the northern continental region, a peaceful village is buried in snow 4 days after the heroes were eliminated.
A skeletal hand holds out a map as the traveler explains he is lost and needs help finding his way north through the mountains.
Standing in a dim tavern, the hooded figure asks the patrons for directions. The dark-haired man at the table remains silent before telling the traveler that they are an adventurer guild, not a direction service.
The traveler acknowledges this but points out it is the only place open, promising to leave quietly if they just show him the way.
A muscular man with a top knot stands up, calling the traveler shameless for his sudden intrusion.
The dark-haired man stops him, remarking that the newcomer is quite strange. He stares into the hood and notes that the traveler smells of blood, causing the traveler to fall silent.
A subtle, knowing smirk crosses the dark-haired man's face. The traveler mentions a necromancer beyond the mountains who killed knights and destroyed a village. The dark-haired man narrows his eyes with growing suspicion.
A sudden, sharp clash sounds as a thrown dagger is deflected by the traveler's arm.
Pointing a finger, the dark-haired man asks if the traveler is actually talking about himself.
The traveler reveals his skull mask and glowing pink eyes, identifying the attackers as undead. Staring coldly, the warrior mutters about the audacity of those before him.
He warns them to pick their opponents more carefully before starting trouble. A massive explosion erupts through the tavern as he dismisses them as mere rookies.
The dark-haired man watches the destruction in silence.
2 quick thuds sound as the traveler looks down at the muscular man trapped in a hole in the floor.
The dark-haired man wonders if their presence was sensed and decides to kill the traveler now that the surprise attack has failed. He gives the order to kill as 2 men die from the upper floor.
The small skull warrior is surrounded as the attackers converge on him.
Clenching his fist, the traveler declares that everything happening from now on is their fault.
The muscular man lunges from above with a fierce battle cry, screaming for the traveler to die.
The skull warrior ducks beneath the heavy blade with perfect timing.
A flurry of rapid impact sounds as the warrior lands multiple strikes on the man's chest.
A heavy crack echoes as the warrior kicks the man through a wall while another attacker approaches.
The man with the headband charges forward with a desperate shot.
The skull warrior counters the lunge with a blindingly vast strike.
A sharp snap sounds as the warrior catches his opponent's arm.
2 heavy thuds follow as the warrior slams the attacker into the ground, shattering the floorboards. The skull warrior stands alone as dust fills the ruined tavern. Benlir stands calmly amidst the tavern's wreckage.
The skull mask stares the hat coldly.
Attackers converge as the scarred man watches.
Benlir clips through the air, dodging blades.
Shock registers on the scarred man's gaze.
He slams both attackers into the floorboards. The muscular captain watches the sudden carnage. Confused, the captain wonders where his opponent went. Benlira appears silently behind his next target.
A swift kick disarms the surprised captain. The captain's gaze sharpens with intense determination. He unleashes a powerful technique called Fang Strike. Benlira's hollow eye flashes with pink currency.
The warrior narrowly evades the lethal blade's edge. Benlira identifies the initial attack as a feint.
He anticipates the real strike coming from below.
The skull warrior expertly catches the captain's arm.
A brutal downward kick crushes the captain's defense. Nearby adventurers stare in horror at the scene. The defeated captain lies broken amidst the debris.
Benlira stands tall as the smoke clears. He asks who wishes to be next.
A mysterious voice questions the warrior's true identity.
Thor Vinland offers a peaceful negotiation from above.
The terrified tavern patron suggests providing the directions.
Thor introduces himself as the Empire's northernmost master.
The guild master suggests finding a quiet place.
They move the conversation to the master's office.
Thor recounts rumors of a mountain skeleton.
He details the various search teams sent out.
Thor laughs upon seeing the rumor is real.
He settles into a more serious demeanor.
Benlira slams the table to demand answers.
He insists on completing their business immediately.
Thor notes that the request is quite simple.
He produces a crumpled pack of cigarettes.
Thor laments the villagers' constant fear of monsters.
A match flares as he lights up.
Benlira rebukes their lack of resistance against tyranny.
He declares that inaction brings only death.
Thor argues that they did try and act.
He admits their efforts were ultimately futile. Crows take flight over a desolate landscape.
Benlira questions why they didn't form a Hansis.
Thor remarks that such actions mean total war. He explains that courage alone wasn't enough. They waited for a savior who never came. They survived by clinging to desperate hope. Thor recalls the moment their luck changed.
He reveals the arrival of a legendary hero.
Hope briefly flickered within their hearts.
Their collective hope proved completely illusory. Thor Vinland identifies hatred as missing.
Their future and home become irrelevant. Killing justifies the brutal sacrifice required. Benlira prepares to issue a request.
Thor promises immediate Alpen support.
Thor accepts Benlira's nature without Decklight. Thor Vinland commits to Benlira's crusade. Heavy silence follows the Master's declaration. Benlira apologizes for damaging the guild and admits he feels responsible for the village being neglected by the Empire.
Benlira accepts his first mission in ages.
Thor recognizes the ancient extinct objects.
Thor explains the rarity of the tags. Thor questions the Skull Warrior's identity.
Benlira dismisses his origins as irrelevant. Benlira officially accepts the request and declares they must first travel to the northern mountain range to begin. The warrior proceeds into the shadows.
A map tracks the traveler's journey.
Time passes during the long trek.
The guide reports they have been moving secretly along the mountain range for 5 days.
Benlira observes that their secret movement is quite fast, and the red-haired man agrees they must avoid Imperial troops.
The warrior acknowledges their rapid case.
Benlira spots an unexpected Anli Ting.
The guide analyzes the soldiers below. The black-haired man identifies the group as Tower Village survivors and plunderers returning to the capital.
Benlira asks if they were isolated while moving to the capital, and his companion confirms this based on their lack of winter gear.
Benlira asks what lies along the lower path, prompting his companion to mention Murren's name while the warrior remains confused.
The red-haired man explains that as his name and introduces the black-haired companion as Sword Harrier.
Sword Harrier explains that the path below leads to small settlements which the desperate knights will likely pillage for resources.
Murren laments that Imperial knight pillaging has become a common tragedy.
Murren notes that routine corruption has plagued the provinces since the current emperor took power, prompting Benlira to reflect.
Benlira resolves to eliminate the knights.
The guide reacts with sudden alarm. The companions are stunned by the decoration. They watch in horror as action unfolds.
A sudden explosion rocks the camp. Panicked knights wonder if a raid is occurring.
The warrior prepares for a slaughter. The companions realize Benlira has already siek. A knight identifies his attacker as the necromancer from Tower Village, while Benlira clashes with his spear.
The Skull Warrior Karsu R.
He unleashes a whirlwind of destruction. A knight's defense is shattered instantly.
The warrior continues his relentless assault.
A knight screams for help before ordering her troops to block the escape route and surround their lone enemy. The female knight realizes her mistake as a shadow looms. The mounted knight is brutally cut down. The warrior questions their weak resistance. Benlira lifts the severed head and mockingly asks if his opponent's eyes were merely for decoration. A tide of ghoulish purple faces surrounds the lone warrior. Benlira's army of monsters begins a systematic slaughter of the Imperial Knights. Murren observes that the skill shown at the guild was merely a fraction of the warrior's true power. A chorus of agonized cries sounds as the purple beasts tear into the armored soldiers. The skull mask stares ahead with cold, unblinking focus. The monsters continue their visceral dismemberment of the fleeing knights. A legend reborn, the ghost of Tower Village stands tall upon the battlefield. Murren notes the conflict is concluding and suggests they descend, receiving a brief acknowledgement from his red-haired companion.
The Skull Warrior remains perched atop his spectral purple lout.
Battlefield narration confirms the tide has turned irrevocably against the knights. A brutal, wet crunch sounds as a monster devours its prey. A desperate knight charges with a fierce battle cry while the warrior remains unmoved. Steel clashes against bone as the mounted warrior meets the final resistance. Blinding speed carries the warrior through the final remnants of the fray.
A heavy crack sounds as a helmet shatters, revealing a bloodied face and triggering a memory of a golden charm.
A rough hand presents a small stone charm as a token of apology. In a memory, the black-haired man explains their suspicion towards someone of the warrior's strange nature. The man explains that his daughter made the charm for an adventurer's safety, and though the warrior accepts it gratefully, the man admits speaking to the girl is now impossible. The Skull Warrior stands alone, contemplating the gift. The man apologizes for his blunt words, but the warrior assures him that everyone there shares a common bond. The man reflects on those driven by revenge against the Empire and warns the warrior not to consume his life with hatred. Offering brotherly advice, the man reminds the warrior that someone is surely waiting for him. Back in the present, a dying knight warns the skeleton not to go too far as his life fades. A sharp squelch sounds as the final blow is delivered to the fallen soldier. The Skull Warrior begins a soft, regretful apology to the dead. Gasping for breath, the knight calls out to his daughter, Michelle, before his voice fails forever. Silence falls over the snowy waste after the knight's passing. The warrior turns his attention toward a lingering, multi-eyed monstrosity. A blinding flash of light tears through the dark atmosphere. With a sharp boom, the warrior dispels the remnants of the necrotic energy. Murren praises the warrior's effort as the two companions arrive on the scene. Pointing out the field is clear, Murren asks if corpses are needed for more undead and offers to handle the cleanup. The warrior stands silent, raising a bandaged fist toward the heavens. The massive pyre elicits a remark about the warrior's strange and unexpected behavior. The red-haired companion asks about cremation while Benlira flatly states he has no need for an undead army.
Benlira watches the massive pyre consume the fallen soldiers.
He contemplates the motive behind his own grim and solitary actions.
Murren notes a profound sadness visible even through the warrior's static skull mask.
The fire roars with intense, purifying heat.
A dark voice from within the flames reminds Benlira that it is now his turn to face the world.
The entity prophesies that he will face impossible choices and depths of despair.
As the spirit claims his role is just beginning, Benlira curtly orders it to be silent.
Facing the shadowy, multi-eyed beast, the warrior commands it to remain quietly in the afterlife.
A chilling cackle sounds from the darkness of the fire.
The specter questions if the warrior truly considers himself alive and goads him to continue his struggle.
It dares him to defy fate, warning of an unimaginable despair waiting at his journey's end.
The voice fades with a final taunt for the warrior to try and run from his destiny. In a distant, ruined territory, a messenger arrives at a burning fortress under a crimson sky. A woman with a crown listens to the carnage, admiring the melody of the victim's screams.
Smiling with rows of sharp, jagged teeth, she expresses her delight at the scent of burning flesh.
Lady Frey, crowned and smiling, listens to a massive armored soldier who suggests using the princess's head for a game of indoor soccer before asking for her opinion.
Resting her chin on her hand, the red-haired woman admits she is feeling discouraged because she expected the kingdom to be a more significant challenge.
She wonders if there is a worthy opponent left to challenge the Empire and nonchalantly suggests a 4-on-4 match using the prince's head as the ball.
An Imperial messenger arrives at the gate, raising a decree to announce that a massive undead army has been sighted at the northern barrier and ordering the immediate subjugation of the necromancer.
Lady Frey responds with a sinister cackle.
The red-haired woman grins with sharp teeth, calling the opponent a crazy bastard for showing up so quickly.
A discarded hat falls to the earth near bare feet.
Feet wrapped in red cloth stride forward over parched ground. Standing before a line of towering armored guardians, Lady Frey invites everyone to go play.
She declares the start of a war. 3 cloaked figures trek across a vast frozen mountain peak.
The black-haired man comments on the heavy silence of the tourney.
Looking at the red-haired boy, the man observes that walking for 2 weeks without a word makes someone resemble a corpse.
The skeleton warrior, viewed from behind, agrees with the grim comparison.
The redhead boy stares at the traveler, wondering how a disembodied skull manages to float in the air. In a quiet office, Thor Vinland reflects on the mysterious undead entity that emerged from Tower Village.
He considers the high probability that the creature is linked to the recently fallen hero.
As Sword Harrier and Murren Same watch, Thor notes that the village was the hero's childhood home. Thor observes that the timeline of the hero being hunted and fleeing back home coincides perfectly with the undead army incident.
He visualizes the skeleton warrior's unique combat style. Comparing the warrior to the blonde hero, Thor decides the entity isn't evil but is likely suffering from the same despair they all share.
While penning a letter, Thor admits he is unsure of the warrior's motives for traveling north but remains convinced he is not an enemy, though his status as an ally is unconfirmed.
Thor believes the warrior represents the essential key needed to dismantle the Empire. Standing before the two adventurers, Thor asks for their help since they are natives of the northern regions.
Data entries identify the black-haired man as the 5th-rank tank Sword Harrier and the red-haired boy as the 5th-rank damage dealer Murren Same.
Harrier questions if the unpredictable warrior will cooperate, but Thor tells him to remain calm.
Thor smiles confidently while holding a scroll, claiming he relies on his strong instincts.
Harrier remains silent and visibly worried.
Back in the cold, Harrier points toward the distant landscape and addresses the undead traveler.
The Skull Warrior stares into the waypoint. A vibrant memory flickers to life as a happy blonde girl holds up a brown paper bag toward the warrior.
The warrior places the bag over his skull as a makeshift mask, earning a thumbs up from the call.
A peaceful mountain village with red-roofed houses appears in the distance. Holding hands, the girl and the bag-masked warrior run through the cobblestone streets toward a tavern.
The girl beams with joy and flashes a peace sign while pulling her companion along.
A friendly red-haired barmaid winks at her paykengs.
The blonde girl introduces the warrior to the smiling woman at the counter.
A man stands near dartboards in the center of the bustling cavern.
The warrior holds a bundle of darts as the girl encourages him. The crowd erupts in a massive "oh" as the warrior lands a perfect triple bullseye.
Laughter and music fill the air in the crowded, lively hall. The warrior raises a wooden mug, his paperback mask showing happy, squinted eyes.
A moment of pure, masked contentment.
The tavern sign swings gently in the garret.
Day turns to a stormy night as the tavern sign becomes weathered and worn. Empty dartboards hang on a wall scarred by neglect and time.
Overturned furniture litters the dusty, abandoned floor of the once joyful hall.
The sprawling tavern stands as a hollow, dark shell of its former self. The Skull Warrior sits in the oppressive shadows, lost in thought. He grips his own bandaged arms tightly, a lone figure in the ruins of a memory.
Shocked reaction to his sudden touch.
A small skull warns Benlira that it is too late for old memories.
The red-haired barmaid asks the skeleton warrior if he still uses his old bread bag mask. Smiling warmly, the woman recognizes her old patron despite his change.
The skeleton warrior wonders how he was recognized, while the woman explains she heard many stories about him from his pupil but never knew he became an undead.
Taking a swig from a green bottle, she exhales a satisfied, "Ha."
She grips the liquor bottle firmly. Addressing the warrior by his old nickname, the barmaid continues her story. Recalling a past promise, the woman mentions a group that hoped to share a drink with him on a future journey.
Harrier explains to Murren that adventurers traditionally drink together to wish for safety before a journey.
Looking deeply troubled, Murren notes that this specific liquor hasn't been sold for a long time. Village abandoned by all adventurers now.
Amidst a montage of war and flames, a narrator admits the country is ruined but argues the warrior's current path is wrong, questioning if he can still fulfill a child's wish.
Warrior sits alone in somber silence.
He admits his unworthiness with the top.
Looking at a journal and an amulet, Benlira hears a comment about a better version of himself.
A vision of the blonde hero appears, stating these items were meant for the warrior.
Turning pages filled with heroic sketches, the narration describes the classic fairy tale path of gathering companions and defeating evil.
A profile of a smiling hero reflects on the legends of the past. Legendary adventurers pose in bright memories.
The barmaid repeats the promise of a future meeting.
Warrior remains silent amidst old memories.
Staring at his own bandaged hand, Benlira ponders the true meaning of adventure.
Contemplating a photograph, the warrior reflects on how revenge and anger have clouded his judgment and led to repeated mistakes.
He thanks the innkeeper for drinks.
The red-haired woman asks where his next journey will take him.
As his cape billows in the wind, Benlira considers the possibility of a new beginning.
Haunted by the image of a happy child, the warrior admits he seeks adventure rather than just revenge.
Murren and Harrier wait outside, asking if he has finished his business.
Harrier explains they will take the main road and mocks the skeleton's lack of insulation.
Benlira jokingly calls his comrades lacking as they prepare to depart, leaving Harrier offended.
Harrier looks back, sensing that the warrior's heavy aura has undergone a subtle shift. Smiling confidently, Murren notes that the warrior's internal worries seem to have vanished.
Thor Vinland presents a mysterious school.
Harrier acknowledges his guild masters of Buri.
Standing in the village, Harrier enthusiastically invites the group to move forward together.
Skeleton warrior follows his new allies. Narration explains the 10 adventurer ranks.
A man holds a handful of gold, illustrating how higher-ranked adventurers can command any price for their services.
Harrier walks through the grass while the narrator defines the 7th rank as the peak for ordinary humans.
Harrier observes a massive serpent as the narration explains that rank 8 adventurers are solo explorers of uncharted lands.
A blood-splattered warrior bellows in battle, representing those who defend the front lines alone.
High-ranked knights lead the Empire's armies.
Narration prepares to summarize power levels.
A weak monster is swiftly decapitated.
Harrier walks away from the carcass, dismissing the kill as a task for low-tier fighters.
Harrier draws his blade for battle.
A colossal cyclops looms over Harrier.
Harrier leaps into the air with a massive axe to strike the beast's head.
As Harrier delivers a punishing blow to the giant's leg, the narration identifies such feats as the work of mid-tier adventurers.
Murren looks at his arms, contemplating those things. Standing over 3 massive beast carcasses, he notes they were all elite grade.
Murren asks if his words are being heard, and the skeleton warrior quickly confirms that he is listening.
The skeleton warrior asks about their adventurer ranks, and Harrier explains they are both 5th rank courts.
He remarks that the ranking system has changed significantly since his time as an adventurer.
Murren is shocked to learn of his past, as the skeleton claims to have been a successful ruby rank female warrior.
Murren repeats the name of the rank, feeling as though he has heard of it somewhere before.
Harrier bursts into hysterical laughter, dismissing the claim as a fairy tale and mocking the traveler's supposed fear. A crackling surge of purple energy manifests as the concept of an undead army is mentioned. Laughter turns to absolute terror as a massive, shadowy purple beast manifests, triggering a loud, panicked scream.
The traveler finds the summons effective while Murren tearfully begs him to put the creature away.
Large purple spikes loom as the skeleton agrees to stop, and Harrier mocks Murren for being a scaredy cat. He notes that for a northerner, Murren seems to have the guts of a flea.
A vibrant vision depicts 5 legendary warriors from a long-forgotten age. The traveler sits in a misty void while conversing with a young, blonde hero.
The young hero looks up with a wide, infectious, and determined grin. He remembers a specific feeling of his past adventures through Amari.
Harrier asks why they are heading to the northern mountains, warning that it is a monster park full of beasts in human skin.
The skeleton warrior clarifies that he has business there and needs to find a specific object.
An image of a sharp-toothed man appears as the traveler explains how a bearded man's barrier evaporated his entire undead army.
Murren questions if a simple barrier could be that powerful, but the skeleton insists it was no ordinary defense.
Looking over a stone fortress, he explains the barrier was a hero's design meant to stop waves of undead at the front lines.
He declares that since the undead are useless, he needs a human army to topple the Empire, leaving Murren stunned.
Staring at the distant snowy peaks, he simply confirms his destination.
Murren wonders about befriending barbarians, while Harrier notes they would be the continent's strongest military force.
He mentions his original goal was to use the Emperor's head as a soccer ball, but notes that plan has changed.
He reveals that his beloved student was the one who talked him out of his more gruesome intentions.
His current goal is to properly rebuild the empire instead of merely killing its ruler.
Realizing the story has become heavy, he decides to shift the conversation to a lighter topic. He points out that the pair are likely northern tribesmen who fled after failing their great hunt.
Declaring the journey long, he invites them to attack so he can provide some necessary training pointers.
Murren nervously tries to decline, suggesting they should just keep moving because they are in a hurry.
The traveler turns his back and flatly labels the two adventurers as cowards.
He summons giant purple entities to initiate what he calls a cute little game for his companions.
He commands Harrier to run as the black-haired man flees the scene in a blind panic. Riding atop a massive beast, he tells the fleeing duo he will give them a 10-second head start. Murren screams about the one-sided tyranny and begs Harrier to stop the traveler, believing she has gone insane.
Harrier suddenly stops as a question mark appears over a silhouette, causing Murren to call out in confusion.
Harrier sprints away at full speed, wishing for survival as he leaves his companion behind.
The skeleton counts down from 10 to 1 as Murren gasps in absolute sweaty terror.
A sudden clear ding sounds as the traveler leaps down from the beast toward his panicked student.
A loud scream echoes through the forest as Murren runs for his life from the charging purple monster.
Sunlight shines over the lush green valley while the traveler reflects on the kid, the hero, and everyone else. Clutching his skull, he lets out a series of low, unsettling laughs. He shouts with boisterous laughter that they are his second set of unexpected half-baked students.
He tells Murren to be grateful as he will personally transform the boy into a human weapon.
The purple beast continues its relentless chase while the traveler vows not to lose his way this time.
He asks for others to watch over him until the end so that he can remain true to himself.
An explosion of dust rises from the forest canopy as the scene focuses on the times ahead. A giant hand frames the distant cloud with an OK sign accompanied by a thoughtful hum.
Red-haired Frey steps out a flower.
Purple Beast chases Harrier and Noan.
Purple energy beam strikes near Harrier. Panicked, Harrier yells he's dying. Harrier begs for the chaos to stop.
Harrier flees from a massive lek.
Benlyra and Frey clash a bow.
Frey smiles and draws her sword.
Benlyra rides atop the giant beast.
Benlyra reacts with Sock or Ranning.
Glowing purple energy erupts from clashing seal.
Appearing upside down, Frey offers a Greer.
Benlyra reacts to Frey's strange moveret.
Benlyra grips his glowing purple blade.
Benlyra counters Frey's spiral-style attack.
Red explosion devastates the Borsterida.
Harrier screams out to the skeleton, sir.
Emerging from dust, Benlyra calls Frey rude.
Benlyra demands to know Frey's identity.
Frey identifies herself with a dark grin.
Frey announces her intent to wage war.
Benlyra recalls the legend of 4 knights.
Frey asks to fight, and Benlyra agrees.
Warriors clash in high-speed combat.
A massive blast follows a command. Frey lunges with her giant blade. Metal sparks fly during the duel.
Frey's erratic movements allow a quick strike.
Benlyra is hit by many sharp projectiles.
Frey delivers a powerful, knocking back kick.
Stabbing his sword, Benlyra grunts heavily.
Benlyra notes Frey's bizarre, non-human joint movements.
Frey calls Benlyra an unpleasant bastard.
Benlyra lands a heavy bandaged conch.
Surprise fills Frey as Benlyra sex. Frey is struck by the impact.
Benlyra moves to counter Frey's string.
Benlyra lands after a quick finger. Frey finds the armyless battle disappointing.
Bleeding, Frey asks why he cannot focus.
Frey mocks the meatballs and vows burial.
Benlyra acknowledges Frey's strength and effort.
Raising his hand, Benlyra says, but
Benlyra identifies Frey's poor ice egg claw.
Harrier screams in horror at the scene.
Massive shadowy monster rises behind Frey.
Benlyra orders Murren to run immediately.
Thick red smoke covers the valley.
Harrier and Murren run as a Vigor.
Harrier demands a warning, Benlyra claims he gave one, Murren notes the missing smoke warning, and Harrier groans about the contents.
Benlyra explains that his spicy smoke bomb recipe consists of Tehran pepper and explosive smoked turtle bone powder as the crying Murren flatly rejects learning the formula.
Harrier asks if there is a plan, noting that even an entire army would struggle against one of the 4 knights.
Benlyra admits that in his current state, he does not believe he can stop her either.
Passing a carved tree trunk, Benlyra notes they have cleared the boundary markers and just need to keep rang.
Harrier tells the group that they need to look behind them immediately.
Riding atop a massive purple creature, the trio watches as armored knights pursue them through the forest.
Frey laughs from above at the concept of an undead army and asks if this is war while Murren screams for the skeleton, sir.
Benlyra prepares a northern-style strike, charging his blade with glowing pink energy.
Frey initiates her spiral-style technique, readying her massive sword for a heavy impact. Frey unleashes a mad dog slaughter attack, clutching violently with the skeleton-summoned beast.
A massive red and purple explosion devastates the surrounding woods.
Radiant energy beams pierce the sky as the clashing powers create a massive shockwave.
A heavy trail of pink smoke drifts toward the snowy peaks of the northern mountains. Emerging from the dust, Frey laughs about the undead monster, weird smoke bombs, and the skeleton's strange swordsmanship.
Looking bloodied and crazed, Frey asks the skeleton sir if he has any more fun left to offer.
Benlyra calls her a villain for kicking up so much dust and getting a lady's clothes dirty.
Frey mocks him, asking if his lack of eyes prevent him from looking in a mirror.
Frey mocks the bastard who got ambushed and calls him a tight-suit pervert, while Benlira mocks the bastard who ran away pathetically and rotted away.
Frey questions why the undead army isn't being used as she notes his proud veteran look.
Benlira expresses disappointment, noting that she seems strong but lacks concentration because she is worried about her companions.
Frey leans in close to the skeleton and menacingly asks if she should just kill them. Her eyes glow with red intent as she asks if he will fight desperately and give his all if she follows through. Benlira warns her that regardless of her confidence, getting so close to an enemy is a foolish mistake.
Frey smiles, noting that his mouth is still running even after being wrecked by her. A spear point appears near Frey's face as she declares her intent to smash his head. A sudden rain of arrows descends from the tree line, forcing Frey to dodge.
Struck by multiple arrows, Frey grunts and calls her hidden attackers arrogant.
Looking toward the trees, Benlira asks for a greeting for Fred.
Benlira welcomes her to the mother mountain of the northern tribes as arrows rain down.
Frey grunts in pain as she pulls the arrows from her arm and shoulder. Warriors in the trees prepare to move while Benlira calls for them to say hello.
Sitting amidst the arrows, Benlira declares that they have reached the northern mountains.
Frey lets out an unsettling laugh, her sharp teeth bared in a sinister grin. Snapping the arrows in her body, Frey notes she wondered why they would travel to the northern tribe's front yard.
As her knights gather, Frey dismisses the tribe's intervention as a little trick.
Benlira tells someone to sweet-talk them well, noting he will wait as long as it takes.
Frey smiles with dark anticipation for the most exciting war ahead. Flanked by massive armored knights, Frey tells the skeleton sir she's looking forward to the conflict.
Benlira wonders if she is crazy as the panicked screams of his comrades reach him. Moran expresses relief at his safety while Harrier nervously asks about the status of the warriors in the trees.
A sudden blush appears on the skeleton's skull as he realizes he almost forgot something.
Benlira waves to the forest, thanking the northern tribes for their help and beginning to introduce himself.
A sudden sharp thud sounds as an arrow pierces clean through the skeleton's waving hand.
A hooded tribal archer laughs, suggesting they should cut off the talking skeleton's head and use it as a drinking cup.
Benlira sighs, realizing that these are exactly the kind of people he expected them to be. The tribal warriors prepare to descend from the trees to attack everyone in the clearing.
A giant command to run appears as both groups flee from the incoming tribal assault.
A purple-haired warrior with glowing red eyes bellows a warning about an intruder.
Harrier screams in terror, questioning why the supposed allies are attacking them.
Harrier shouts that Benlira claimed Clarvis to deal, and the skeleton clarifies it was made 100 years ago as they flee.
The skeleton suggests sharing names with the northern tribe, but the red-haired man refuses because their fugitive status makes it a bad idea.
Harrier notes they have complicated circumstances as the black-haired student reacts with shock to his refusal.
Seeing their hesitation, the skeleton decides he should be the one to provide a man. An authoritative command to stop right there echoes across the clearing.
Edward Benlira identifies himself and requests an audience with the chieftain as a member of the northern tribes.
The red-haired warrior and his companions mock the idea of a talking skeleton being one of their own. Flashing a peace sign, the skeleton expresses relief that the initial misunderstanding has been resolved.
A sudden, sharp clang rings out as iron bars slam shut.
Trapped in a dark stone cell, the skeleton questions their sudden change in fortune while his companions sulk. Harrier sarcastically thanks the skeleton for the brilliant plan that landed them all in prison.
A quick thud sounds as Harrier is silenced by a hit to the head.
Murren asks if he truly belonged to the tribe, and the skeleton admits he did a long time ago.
Panicked, Harrier shouts that they are in the middle of a massive emergency.
Looking over the snowy village of the Red Sheep Tribe, the traveler hopes the chieftain will recognize him. Harrier screams in terror while Moran explains they intended to avoid contact because they were only meant to be guides.
A heavy metallic clang sounds as a guard approaches the Selbros.
An armored tribesman informs the undead prisoner that the chieftain is ready to see him.
Clad in heavy chains, the trio is escorted through the snowy mountain village toward the main hall.
Tied to a heavy wooden post, the traveler observes that the village remains unchanged from his memory.
Led into a large arena, a voice calls out to the talking undead as warriors gather on the stone tiers.
Seated on a throne of bone, Red Silk, the Red Sheep chieftain, mocks the traveler's guts for claiming tribal lineage.
The chieftain's gaze narrows with intense, shadowy scrutiny.
Harrier desperately claims they have the wrong person while Murin watches the tense standoff. Struggling against his restraints, the traveler suggests they should talk once he is untied.
Red Silk leans in close, declaring that impersonating their tribes is a grave and punishable crime.
He dismisses the skeleton's companions as pathetic failures who have no right to the northern name.
After the chieftain notes they failed the great hunt, the skeleton shatters his wooden stocks, remarking on the tribe's stubborn customs.
Bristling with rage, the chieftain warns the undead not to speak so carelessly about things he doesn't understand.
Red Silk silences his subordinate, stating that he will handle this matter personally.
The massive chieftain lunges from his throne with a snarl of fury.
Brandishing 2 red axes, Red Silk bellows his intent to tear the intruder apart.
A heavy stomp impacts the stone ground as the chieftain charges.
Red Silk unleashes a massive axe swing that the skeleton narrowly evades.
The skeleton orders his companions to fall back as a shockwave ripples through the arena.
Shock and disbelief fill Mern's face as the battle begins.
Red Silk continues his relentless assault while the skeleton maneuvers through the strikes.
Letting out a powerful roar, the chieftain brings his axes down in a crushing blow.
Sparks fly as the skeleton parries a sequence of high-speed axe strikes.
Murren watches the exchange in awe, finding the display of power incredible.
As the chieftain strikes blur, Murren notes that even the skeleton sir is holding his own against the onslaught.
The skeleton reflects on the weight of the blows, comparing them to the impact of cannonballs. Moving with supernatural speed, the traveler deflects a barrage of heavy axe swings. A flurry of strikes and parries fills the air as the two warriors duel. Watching from the sidelines, an observer marvels at the skeleton's ability to block every incoming attack. The crowd erupts in feral cheers as the tribesmen roar for more blood and action. The duel intensifies as both fighters exchange blows at blinding speed.
A massive axe strike carves a trench into the stone floor as the skeleton dodges. Red Silk mocks the skeleton's strength, and the traveler winds up a powerful counterpunch.
The chieftain's eyes widen as a firm denial sounds in the air.
A thunderous sounds as a massive impact sends shockwaves across the floor.
Benlira notes the lightness of the impact during the duel.
Red Silk agrees with the assessment while the skeleton points out he is made entirely of bone.
Benlira moves with incredible high-speed agility.
A powerful strike creates a bright spark. Red Silk asserts that the dead should not walk among the living and instead become dust.
The chieftain collapses in sudden, stunned silence. Immobilized, Red Silk wonders if his pressure points were struck and when it could have happened.
Red Silk continues that the dead crumble while the living must remember them and move forward. Benlira notes he has heard that tiring story before, but senses something strange.
Looking down at the kneeling man, Benlira asks why he is walking proudly despite being dead.
Benlira advances toward the immobile warrior, questioning why he cannot move even a single step.
Holding his blade to the chieftain's throat, the traveler suggests they finally have a conversation.
Red Silk admits to an overwhelming defeat, comparing the experience to sparring with his childhood teacher. Accepting his complete loss, the chieftain asks what the skeleton wants from him. Benlira orders him to summon the Northern Tribe chieftains because he intends to attack the Empire.
As a warrior shouts for the chieftain, Red Silk mocks the skeleton's ambition but accepts his role as the defeated.
Red Silk promises to call for the skeleton at the Northern Tribe's Greek Council. While being helped away, the chieftain instructs them to wait at Harrier's estate until the council meets. Benlira looks confused while Murren and Harrier react with their own awkward expressions. Red Silk asks the skeleton if he entered Red Sheep territory without understanding the tribal situation. Red Silk looks toward the red-haired warrior and asks if Harrier failed to tell the group the truth. A voice declares the situation ridiculous and tells the outsider to listen well.
The voice reveals that the red-haired man's real name is Sword Hawker Harrier. Harrier's tribal tattoos are shown as his connection to a sisterly tribe as explained.
Looking somber in his wooden restraints, the warrior is identified as Sword Hawker Harrier.
The journey proceeds through the mountain range. A system notification identifies the area as the Northern Mountains, territory of the Red Sheep tribe.
A snowy tribal village comes into view.
Arriving at a massive timber building, a sign identifies it as Hawker Harrier's Grand Estate.
Holding his face in disbelief, Benlira expresses total shock at a sweaty adventurer walking with such grace. Harrier opens the doors, explaining he abandoned his name when he fled to sever ties with the house. Feeling extremely uncomfortable, Harrier retires to his room and asks to be called if anything happens.
Murren offers a small smile while the skeleton tries to process the revelation.
A scarred, bearded man introduces himself as Banson, the manager of the Hawker estate.
Benlira introduces himself, but the manager already knows Moran as she giggles.
Banson warmly asks if Murren has come well.
Banson explains Murren was the gardener's daughter and Lady Harrier's attendant, though they acted like friends.
Murren looks away as Banson admits he cannot believe Harrier is the next chieftain.
Banson clarifies that Lady Harrier stayed with the Red Sheep temporarily for her studies.
Images of a fire-breathing dragon illustrate the trials required to be recognized as a warrior.
A vision shows a leader instructing the tribe on how to rule as the next chieftain.
Frequent territorial wars with Imperial Knights made the Red Sheep territory the optimal place for Harrier's studies. After the shock of feeling the Great Hunt, Lady Harrier and Murren disappeared 4 years ago. Banson notes that while others returned home, he remained alone to manage the empty estate.
The skeleton looks at the old man and asks why he stayed behind.
The manager offers a wide, warm smile.
Banson explains the house cannot be dirty when Lady Harrier finally makes her return.
Looking back at the skeleton, Banson says Murren shares his faith in their lady's return.
Harrier rests in his old room as Banson claims the tribespeople are all waiting for her.
Finding Murren alone outside, the skeleton asks what she is doing in the snow. Murren explains that her family were originally the gardeners for Harrier's household.
Looking at the flowers, she notes Harrier was a strong candidate for chieftain, though that isn't why she fled with her.
Moran crouches by the garden and offers to share a story from their shared past.
In a flashback, a gardener introduces himself as Pu-Same and presents his daughter Murasame to the White Lion Mane chieftain and his child, Lady Harrier.
The scarred chieftain hums thoughtfully as he observes the newcomers.
A formal welcome confirms the gardener and his daughter are accepted into the tribe's territory.
Seated beneath a massive lion, Chieftain Hawker Rimmon Russ declares that their arrival as refugees aligns with the mountain's will.
The chieftain invites them to join the tribe, and Murin gratefully promises to spend her life repaying his kindness while Harrier watches.
Hawker Rimmon instructs Harrier to give Murin a tour since they are the same age, and Harrier eagerly agrees.
A view of the snowy village.
Harrier introduces himself to Moran, who responds with playful humming and giggles as they walk through the snow. Confused by a supposed tribute, Harrier laughs until he realizes Morin is holding up a pile of northern goat dung.
A soft poke sounds as Harrier uses a stick on the dung while Murin giggles.
Moran flashes a peace sign and introduces herself with a playful bren. Harrier tries to assert his authority, claiming his higher rank means she could be punished for her behavior. Harrier pauses and wonders if such things are actually important.
Murin asks if social standing matters when they are simply playing together.
Harrier falters and admits that rank doesn't really matter in that context. Murin smiles warmly and calls him an idiot for worrying about it. Two children run together playfully.
A wild boar chase begins.
Harrier runs past hidden onlookers. Tribal children watch with curiosity.
Moran poses with a feck.
Murin introduces Harrier to others.
Harrier remains silent beside her.
Harrier flashes a peace thing.
Children play together in fields.
Harrier reflects that Moran is different because she does not worship his status.
She does not flatter him. As they run, he realizes she never seeks anything from him because of his lineage.
Murin encourages him to finish his task, seeing him as himself rather than just the chieftain's son.
Harrier looks at her with a newfound sense of connection. Harrier smiles with genuine happiness. He feels truly seen.
Years later, Harrier sits with Murin in a field and asks for her attention.
Harrier worries about becoming like his mother and his upcoming studies with the Red Sheep tribe, but Moran playfully teases the future chieftain's anxiety.
Murin tells him not to worry so much. She reassures him that the entire White Lion Mane tribe believes in his potential.
A booming greeting welcomes the young warrior to a new hall. Chieftain Red Silk identifies himself as Harrier's new master, promising to teach him everything while warning him not to fall behind.
Red Silk lectures that a chieftain must be the strongest pillar, as a loser cannot guarantee the unity of the tribe.
Harrier struggles to pull a massive boulder while his master declares that personal strength is the foundation of the tribe's power. A sharp click sounds as a chess piece is moved on a tactile park. Red Silk commands Harrier to observe the battlefield and think constantly.
He emphasizes that a single mistake could cost the lives of everyone in the tribe.
Harrier stands in a vast library as Red Silk explains that the collection contains over 2,000 volumes on tribal laws, history, and monsters. The master orders him to learn it all, leaving Harrier buried under mountains of scrolls and books.
A soft drip sounds as blood falls onto the open pages of a textbook.
Harrier stares at his bloodied palms in exhausted, stunned silence.
Bleeding, she questions her own capabilities.
Murin smiles warmly with a crush.
A golden eye narrows in focus.
Shelves are filled with old rabbits. Surrounded by scrolls, Harrier resolves to stay strong.
Harrier's training continues a year later.
Murin and Banson watch a departure.
The hooded traveler remains silent.
A shattered flower pot lies abandoned.
They watch as the figure leaves.
Murin hears a piece in shock and is,
Harrier has fled from the tribe.
A grandfather tells Harrier a hero's tale.
The elder recounts common stories for children. Young Harrier cherishes the story with admiration. She respected her mother's role as protector.
Tribespeople followed the great warrior's lead. Young Harrier trains with a wooden sword.
Her dedication turned to desperation over time.
Eventually, only a broken boy remained.
A voice tells Moran to calm down.
Banson warns Murin about the dangerous blizzard, advising against searching for Harrier blindly when even warriors avoid such conditions. Banson shouts for Murin to time. Murin acknowledges the danger but continues walking.
She presses on through the biting wind.
Her footprints vanish in the mountains now. Murin struggles against the freezing cold.
She calls out Harrier's name softly.
The scene shifts to an adventurer village.
An empty tavern sits in silence. Footsteps echo on the wooden stairs.
A disheveled Harrier drinks from the ball. She recalls advice about becoming an adventurer.
Murin arrives at the tavern's threshold.
A wooden drawer remains tightly shut.
Harrier stares in disbelief, murmuring Murin's name.
Murin declares that she summed her. She asks why she ran away.
Harrier claims the life did not suit her.
She laughs, claiming she has none caught.
She believes she lacks any proper qualifications.
Murin approaches the dejected warrior slowly.
Murin suddenly seizes Harrier's collar tightly. Murin aggressively rejects the nonsense, insisting Harrier wanted to be a great chieftain and demanding to know who discouraged her.
Harrier identifies her master as the one.
Shock is reflected in Murin's wide eye. Harrier explains that multiple failures define one's level.
Harrier admits to failing the Great Hunt 4 times, citing a lack of combat sense and poor magic aptitude.
She laments lacking outstanding skills or strategy.
Harrier laments her lack of talent, claiming she possesses only decent instincts and eyes.
Harrier laments her perceived inadequacy as a warrior.
Murin watches in silence as Harrier despairs.
Darkness represents the crushing weight of failure.
Expectations feel like overwhelming hands upon her.
Murren asks if she ran away, and Harrier admits it is simply easier to breathe here. Harrier explains that there is no master or tribe to treat her with the uncomfortable weight of leadership, identifying herself as nothing more than a pathetic drunk shield warrior at the bottom of her life.
Murren seizes Harrier's chin, demanding to know if this life is truly what she wanted.
Harrier crouches in the tavern and admits she does not know. A golden eye reflects Harrier's internal struggle.
Murren's gaze reveals her deep concern. 2 years pass in the story's Kainag.
A snowy village stands within the northern region.
A hand holds a scroll as a quick flack sounds.
Murren notes that requests have been coming for years, explaining that since the nearby guild disbanded, the workload has piled up on them while Harrier prepares for duty.
Harrier places a hand on her wooden shield.
Harrier signals Moran that it is time to depart. Moran smiles as she notes that Harrier has finally brightened up again.
Murren observes that Harrier never mentions the track.
Harrier calls out that she will wait below, and Murren playfully calls her an idiot.
The shield remains a symbol of her past.
Murren wonders if an earthquake is happening as a heavy thud sounds.
The skeleton's appearance marks a new turning point.
A cold wind blows through the open ore.
In a flashback, Murren explains that she sees the old Harrier returning whenever they are with the skeleton.
Murren suggests Harrier's true ability might be similar to the skeleton's, despite her own self-proclaimed simple-mindedness.
A quick tap sounds as Moran fidgets, asking if the skeleton would take Harrier as a student.
The skeleton agrees that Harrier has talent, but believes she simply met the wrong type of master.
Murren looks out over the horizon with hope. The skeleton resolves to provide what she needs. Harrier sits bewildered as she asks who yes. A sudden, powerful smash sounds as a fist punches through the wooden wall.
Harrier is startled by the sudden intrusion.
The skeleton's face appears through the wreckage as he demands they begin training, prompting an immediate scream from Harrier.
Dragging Harrier by her collar, the skeleton insists they move quickly and stop joking around.
The skeleton winks and warns that any day of rest will be known by both him and the enemy, commanding her to never stop until she dies. Harrier asks why he is announcing her murder so naturally. Harrier protests, asking why he is being so harsh after hearing her sad story. A dull bonk sounds as the skeleton punches Harrier's head and tells her to shut up.
The skeleton asks how Harrier knew about her own flashback, and Moran giggles while explaining that she simply has very good ears.
The skeleton promises that he will not teach her as a joke.
Harrier dizzily mumbles nonsense with a bump on her head.
Murren finds Harrier's airheaded behavior quite cute.
Harrier continues to mumble playfully while lying cased.
A wooden staff thuds against the grouse.
A traveler wanders through the snow, mourning fallen comrades by calling out their names and offering a desperate apology.
The scarred man laments that he cannot go to Valhalla in his current state. Guilt consumes him for being the sole survivor.
Shadowy wolves with glowing eyes growl in the mist.
A dire warning announces the arrival of Imperial wolves.
Banson slams the table and asks where Harrier has gone.
The skeleton leans back and explains he is teaching her while Banson is busy. Banson calls the idea ridiculous and labels Harrier a failure who ran away, but the skeleton retorts that the old man simply has no eye for people. Skeleton claims failing to recognize potential makes one's eyes mere decoration, prompting a dark glare from the man. A soldier shouts for the chieftain as an aggressive knocking interrupts the room's silence. The man notes the tribe's noise while the gatekeeper demands to know who has arrived.
A blonde warrior bows in desperation, declaring they must strike the Empire now to face their fallen comrades in Valhalla.
The leader refuses the request, explaining that an immediate strike would cause an all-out war with severe casualties.
He questions how a man in his broken physical state expects to fight.
The leader orders the Defense Force member to return to his post and avoid meaningless battles.
The warrior screams in frustration, reminding the chieftain that they already suffered death at the coastline.
Skeleton asks about the man's identity, and the leader identifies him as a survivor of the Coastal Defense Force.
A memory depicts a brutal surprise attack by the Empire's army that left the coast in ruins.
The massacre left only 10 veteran members of the Defense Force alive.
A soldier urges a retreat before they are surrounded, but the blonde warrior resists leaving his comrades despite his crushed leg.
The captain, pierced by arrows, is called by a dying subordinate as blood pools around them. A scream of agony escapes the captain's lips as he faces his end. The blonde warrior watches in horror as a knight's blade executes the remaining survivors.
A lone thought remains bound to that tragic moment.
A somber message laments the luxury of recovering the dead from a battlefield of empty coffins.
The warrior kneels alone among a sea of crosses in a massive graveyard.
Murren looks out over a snowy market village and asks a bewildered question. Skeleton tells Murren she already qualifies as a Northern warrior due to her power, intelligence, and life experience. Skeleton questions if she intentionally failed her previous trials for Harrier's sake. Murren feels strange being praised and asks about Harrier's state. Skeleton explains Harrier is trapped by self-loathing and her father's shadow, but notes she will be capable once those are removed.
Skeleton declares that a warrior's will is their most vital attribute.
A memory of past training sessions reveals the skeleton's struggle to teach the essence of being a warrior. A scarred woman notes that while cruel, direct experience is the only way a warrior truly learns.
Skeleton realizes his purpose is to offer wisdom from a bygone era to the present.
He resolves to bring out Harrier's true strength so she can return to the battlefield.
Harrier stands ready to face a horde of goblin wolf riders to prove her worth. The journey leads to the entrance of the northern mountains.
A red-haired warrior releases a fierce, open-mouthed scream.
The red-haired woman warns the knights not to eat dirty snow, but they insist it is a delicious treat.
Former Captain Escher Soma insults the knight's intelligence, but the red-haired woman playfully dismisses the claim.
Soma notes their individual combat strength while the knights joke about using blood to make strawberry shaved ice.
She asks the captain if his arrival is related to claiming a high-ranking title.
Soma rejects the idea, stating his only goal is to find the necromancer.
She asks why his army is idling instead of entering the mountains.
She smiles darkly, suggesting he will provide entertainment if she waits for him to act.
Soma looks down with a look of pure disgust.
He decides he will not wait any longer. A large camp of white tents sits nestled in the snowy valley. A knight on horseback commands the 4th squad to scout while everyone prepares for the extreme colt.
The armored horses gallop forward as the army heads toward the mountains.
Soma vows to make the necromancer pay for the damage done to his face.
Skeleton and his companions arrive at the outskirts of a large tent. Entering the tent, the skeleton salutes and asks Red Sheep for an update on the situation.
Red Sheep reports that the Imperial Army has successfully invaded the mountain range.
Standing over a map, Red Sheep explains this attack is a massive effort from the coast to completely seize the territory.
He realizes the earlier coastal massacre was just a setup for this inevitable invasion.
With a narrowed eye, he accepts that they are now at war.
Skeleton reaches out to the man he calls Red Sheep.
Skeleton tells Harrier he will lead the way, gently patting her head as she smiles in agreement.
A weathered metal helmet conceals a warrior's face.
Spears and shields clash as battle erupts across the snowy plains.
An axe wielder leaps into the fray with a fierce, echoing "Arararara!"
Skeleton stands atop a snowy ridge, sensing the familiar heavy scent of blood on the wind.
He reflects on how his heart feels different during this battle compared to the hundreds he has faced before.
He vows to embrace his responsibility and carry the wishes of others onto the battlefield.
Harrier suddenly demands to go too, leaving the skeletal warrior momentarily stunned.
A blonde warrior in scale armor kneels in the snow, frustrated by his forced stay in the medical unit.
He declares that being unable to fight makes him feel as though he were already dead.
Skeleton recognizes the injured man from the defense force and tries to calm him, but the warrior remains defiant.
Skeleton questions if the man's desire to fight is fueled by a dream of revenge for his fallen comrades.
The warrior rejects the idea of revenge, explaining that he only wishes to fulfill his failed duty as a shield.
He expresses deep shame over his incomplete mission and his desperate need to finish what he started.
Skeleton admires the man's honor before asking how he would feel if those fallen comrades were summoned back.
The warrior is taken aback as Skeleton reaches out a hand toward him.
He initially dismisses the idea, calling the awakening of the dead a dishonorable and dark art.
Despite his hesitation, the man clenches his sword hilt with a firm clench as he thinks of his brothers in arms.
The warrior bows his head in a silent, emotional plea before the skeletal being.
Skeleton acknowledges the request as fragments of energy begin to swirl in the air. He reaches out as a brilliant, holy light begins to manifest around his hand.
Skeleton asks to borrow the warrior's flag while the man looks up with eyes full of tears.
He pulls the stunned warrior to his feet in the midst of the growing radiance.
The blonde man can only stare in shock at the absurdity of the moment.
A massive burst of purple energy erupts as Skeleton sends infinite praise for the warrior's dedication.
Nearby soldiers are blinded by the sudden flash, crying out in confusion at the light. The warrior winces against the glare while Skeleton stands firm in the center of the surge.
He gasps as his vision clears, seeing something impossible unfolding before him.
Skeleton commands the northern warrior to raise his head and face his returning comrades. A skeletal soldier with glowing yellow eyes peers out from beneath an ancient helmet.
A legion of undead heroes rises from the snow as Skeleton announces their return from the realm of the dead.
The tattered flag of the defense force rises once more against the sky.
The spectral coastal defense force begins its immediate march back to the front lines. They return to protect the Mother Mountain that is being invaded once again.
Skeleton acknowledges the rudeness of the summoning, but insists their strength is needed by the living. The undead warriors fall upon the enemy, proving that neither death nor the afterlife can stop their duty. Every fallen member of the defense force rallies to the call. They emerge from behind a wall of shields, determined to complete their mission before the night ends. The blonde warrior weeps as he hears the command for the defense force to respond to their rising flag. He raises his sword under the banner, realizing his surviving comrades have been waiting for this reunion.
Living knights on horseback charge desperately toward the ghostly legion.
The skeletal army stands its ground as the horses gallop toward their territory.
A skeletal warrior watches the approaching enemy with unmoving, glowing eyes. They stand as an indomitable shield, absorbing the impact of the enemy's desperate charge.
Skeleton asks the spirits for forgiveness for his dark art, pleading for the defense force to finish their final task. He renders a formal salute, asking the higher powers to grant them this one final request.
Skeleton tells Harrier that the reality of the battlefield is still too advanced for her current level. However, he concedes that observing such a conflict is an important part of her learning process.
The trio watches from a high ridge as the purple energy of the undead army clashes with the invaders below.
Skeleton challenges Harrier to prove her worth on this real battlefield, seeking the answers she missed during her training.
Harrier reflects on the battlefield. Narration describes the site of slaughter. Skeleton challenges Harrier's ability to survive. Harriet hesitates to answer her master. Skeleton strikes her to focus her mind. A skeletal hand warns her to embrace the curses and tragedies inherent in war. Skeleton urges Harrier to focus solely on carrying out her role in the conflict.
Harrier is confused as her master moves toward the front lines without her. A blood-soaked hammer rests amidst corpses.
The red-haired captain celebrates the deployment of the undead army while preparing to settle a score.
An explosion marks the start of the battle as Murin and Harrier watch. Skeleton encourages Harrier to leap into the center of the life and death struggle.
A strike cleaves through the battlefield.
Harrier's identity as a northern warrior is confirmed as she dons her mask.
Imperial commanders order their mage and shield squads to advance into firing positions.
Mages prepare their glowing blue spells.
Harrier rushes toward the Imperial line.
Harrier leaps over the enemy shields.
A knight marvels at Harrier's power. Harrier's golden eye is filled with focus.
Harrier executes a brutal aerial kill.
Blood splatters across the white snow.
Moran observes that Harrier's movements are vastly superior now that she is fighting without her shield.
Skeleton analyzes Harrier's natural flexibility and muscle elasticity, noting her shield previously limited her potential.
The master explains that Harrier's old style prevented her from accessing her true power.
Narration explains that Harrier struggled because she tried to imitate her mother's fighting form.
Harrier prepares to reveal her true ability. Narration identifies Harrier's strength in close-quarters brawls and her use of concealed weapons against multiple foes.
A concealed blade strikes a knight.
Harrier uses wires to dispatch enemies. Skeleton realizes Harrier is a rare rogue and warrior dual-class variant exactly like himself. Fear vanishes in the heat of battle. The struggle continues amidst the chaos.
Harrier is recognized as a northern warrior.
Skeleton demands his opponent focus on the fight instead of looking away.
The red-haired captain leaps at the skeleton, mocking his attempt to teach during a battle. She attacks aggressively, ridiculing the skeleton for trying to play mentor while in danger.
The red-haired captain promises a swift death.
Skeleton reacts with frustration as he is pressed by the relentless assault.
A flurry of strikes overwhelms the master.
A kick connects with the master's face. The enemy captain glides past him.
A massive shockwave ripples through the snow.
Harrier cries out for her master.
The blonde warrior unleashes a powerful technique called Wolf Cloud against the Imperial forces.
Feet spring from the snowy ground.
Moran crashes down with a massive axe.
Harrier thanks Murin to the approach.
A sinister smile appears from the shadows. Soma laments that his prey was stolen but continues to survey the battlefield with malice. Looking down from the ridge, the masked carrier observes that the scarred warrior's movements are strikingly similar to Skeleton's.
The scarred warrior, Soma, prepares his heavy blade, noting that while his opponent cannot defeat Skeleton, he intends to make the master his own prey.
A sinister red eye glows in the shadows as Soma anticipates a quick appetizer before the main course.
Soma bellows a challenge to the northern rookies, standing firm as Harrier and Moran descend from above to strike.
Focus narrows as a crimson light flares, signaling the activation of the lethal Doan style. A massive shockwave erupts from the center of the battlefield as Soma unleashes the devastating wolf howl technique.
Murin is blown back by the force, struggling to comprehend the warrior's sudden and drastic shift in power.
Harrier urges her companion to adapt quickly, insisting they must fight as a coordinated team from this point forward.
A strange clarity washes over Harrier, where fear vanishes and she feels every nerve in her body pulsing with life.
Moving with newfound freedom, Harrier sprints across the frozen ground, her focus absolute and her spirit unburdened. Soma mocks their maneuvers, comparing their attempts to flank him to the scurrying of a common rat. Rage contorts Soma's face as the battle forces him to relive bitter, hateful memories.
He slams his sword into the earth, triggering a Doan-style technique that sends jagged cracks racing through the ice.
Harrier gasps in surprise at the sheer force of the impact while Soma exhales a cold, focused breath.
Noticing a pattern, Harrier realizes Soma can only execute one major technique per breath, creating a fleeting opening.
Murin readies her massive axe as Harrier signals her to strike, launching their coordinated counteroffensive.
With a fierce command to go, Harrier hurls herself into the center of the warrior's guard.
Murin screams Harrier's name as a massive explosion of snow and force pushes Soma back, though he remains standing.
A sudden realization hits Harrier as she utters a quiet apology, her orange eye widening behind her mask.
Gritting his teeth, Soma recovers his stance, declaring that the fight is far from over.
A spectral wolf howls in the background as the warrior prepares to unleash a second wave of power. A violent splash of crimson sprays across the white landscape, signaling a successful, bloody strike.
Blurred fragments of Harrier's past from her training sessions to moments of childhood joy flash through her mind. She remembers her lifelong love for stories of northern warriors, wondering if her mother's influence shaped her destiny.
In the present, Harrier and Soma are locked in a blood-stained embrace of combat, both suffering from grievous wounds.
In another part of the field, Skeleton clashes with Captain Escher, their blades producing a shower of sparks.
Escher nimbly ducks under Skeleton's purple sword, her red hair flowing as she readies a counter.
The two combatants engage in a high-speed duel, their movements leaving trails in the snow.
Skeleton presses the attack from above while Escher spins to deflect the force of his blow. Escher glides past her opponent, a cold and focused expression fixed on her face.
Centering her weight, she executes a spinning spiral-style technique that whips the air around her. Skeleton reacts with visible shock as his strike is countered with unexpected precision.
A titanic slash of energy tears across the horizon, dwarfing the soldiers fighting nearby.
Skeleton is nearly overwhelmed by the raw power of the blast, his form silhouetted against the light. The force of the explosion sends Skeleton skidding backward, a sharp gasp escaping his hollow chest. Breathing heavily, Skeleton looks over the bodies of the fallen Imperial soldiers strewn across the snow.
Escher casually steps on the head of a dead soldier, asking Skeleton if he chose to block her attack to protect those behind him.
Skeleton holds his sword high, asking why he wouldn't protect his allies in the heat of battle.
She mocks his sentiment, calling it mean that he only protects his own while her kids are left to rot as corpses.
Skeleton points a bony finger at her, telling her to stop speaking nonsense and look at the suffering of her own men.
Escher looks back with a vacant, bored expression, seemingly unaffected by his words.
A sudden, sharp sound echoes through the silence of the standoff.
Escher breaks into a mocking laugh, telling Skeleton that he says the most amusing things. She dismisses the dead as nothing more than chunks of meat, showing zero regard for her fallen comrades. Skeleton remains silent for a beat before admitting he is curious about her peculiar fighting habits. He notes that she breaks her own flow by alternating hands and moving her sword to the back whenever she throws a punch.
He questions why someone with two fists would only use one, wondering if it's an old habit or a sign of confusion. He acknowledges her rich experience in leadership, but points out her solo combat skills are hampered by these traits.
Looking her in the eye, Escher turns the analysis back on him, identifying Skeleton as a rogue. She realizes that Skeleton is far more intelligent and observant than his appearance would suggest.
Escher laughs mockingly, noting that Skeleton cannot stop thinking about the carnage surrounding them.
In a dark close-up, Escher claims her skill far surpasses that of Skeleton's underlings.
Looming over her opponent, Escher asks if he intends to remain perpetually distracted during their duel.
Tensions reach a breaking point in a focused split panel of the two combatants.
Amidst the slaughter on the field, a chilling laugh echoes through the blood-stained snow.
Escher taunts Skeleton while mid-attack, asking what trick or escape he will attempt next. A massive strike descends from above as Skeleton struggles to track the captain's rapid movements. A sudden, sharp sound rings out as Escher's blade connects with a violent force.
Skeleton retreats under pressure as Escher prepares to unleash her next devastating maneuver. Skeleton wipes his face as Escher marvels at his speed and dodge while he notes the absurdity of countering with a cracked leg.
Escher adjusts her hair while pointing out that Skeleton's movements are full of holes and missing a vital beat.
She questions if his sword is too heavy to swing, wondering why he struggles only against her.
Harrier is suddenly gripped in a bloody struggle, and Escher demands Skeleton focus on his own fight. Escher turns her cold, predatory gaze toward the chaos, calling out for Moran.
Skeleton lunges forward with a powerful punch, catching Escher in a direct, bone-shattering impact.
A titanic shockwave erupts from the point of contact, tearing through the frozen earth.
Reeling from the counter, Ishor mocks Skeleton for becoming distracted yet again during their struggle.
Standing tall, Escher looks down and bluntly calls Skeleton a cold-hearted warrior.
She notes that he focuses immediately on his own minion while countless others are dying around them.
Skeleton stares back with empty eye sockets, his expression a mask of silent focus.
Narrative text acknowledges that the captain's dark assessment is the only thing he agrees with.
Engulfed in a heartless purple energy, Skeleton reflects on the grim reality of the battlefield.
A voice asks why he couldn't save the fallen or even look at them once.
The voice urges him to accept that people will kill their own kind for greed, washing blood with blood.
It predicts that Skeleton, abandoned after taking up a sword for the world, will soon swing it against the world itself.
A memory of a voice breaks through the darkness, asking Skeleton what he is saying.
A dark-haired woman in a simple tunic stands before Skeleton in a peaceful, sunlit setting.
The woman laughs off his guilt, insisting the war isn't his fault and identifying their enemies as the true villains.
She reminds him that they are warriors fighting for what's right, urging him to embrace his northern identity.
Smiling brightly, she encourages him to step onto the battlefield with the indomitable northern will.
Her mouth curves into a final soft syllable as the memory begins to fade.
Skeleton's purple eye flares with a sudden renewed intensity within his hollow skull.
Usher executes a massive aerial swing, her blade cutting a wide arc through the air. Standing firm, Skeleton declares that he is also a warrior of the North. A pillar of radiant power and smoke erupts from Skeleton as he fully commits to the fight.
He recalls a lifetime spent on battlefields, perpetually chasing the distant images of legendary heroes.
A young girl with orange hair and green eyes looks back with a knowing, long-held smile.
Escher continues her relentless dive, bringing her massive blade down toward her revitalized opponent.
Skeleton observes that he was merely muttering to himself during the brief lull in combat.
A thunderous boom sounds as a massive explosion of force signals a disturbing shift in the battle.
Bandaged hands grip a hilt with newfound strength and a focused, lethal intent.
Blades clash with a metallic ring that drowns out the sounds of the surrounding war.
Escher gasps in shock as a sudden bloody strike carves through her shoulder.
Skeleton observes that his sword is reacting with a vibrant, glowing purple energy. With glowing eyes, Skeleton realizes that something fundamental within the duel has finally shattered.
Escher is visibly shaken, asking why his broken flow has suddenly become so fluid and precise. Executing a swirling vortex technique, Skeleton declares that this movement is his final answer. Escher is thrown backward by the sheer magnitude of the rotational force. Mid-air, Escher realizes Skeleton's secret. His attacks kept breaking because he is a dual wielder. Escher screams with wild fury, noting that picking up one more sword changes everything.
Skeleton stands amidst the mountains with a single, quiet thought.
Escher leaps away as a massive purple energy cross slashes the peak. A violent blur of purple and crimson marks a heavy collision.
A colossal pillar of energy tears through the snowy mountain landscape.
Escher shouts that he is only winning because of his second sword.
Skeleton calls her a poor human while she gasps, bleeding and shocked.
The silhouette mocks her for being a knight who ignores death's pain.
A red eye glares from the dark, calling her arrogant and pitiful.
The force of a massive impact sends Escher reeling backward. She screams at her opponent not to look out of her.
Skeleton readies both glowing purple blades with a sharp, focused gasp.
A frantic warning sounds as a dangerous shadow descends from above. A titanic slash of red energy carves a line across the horizon.
He focuses his energy to execute the precise spiral-style technique.
He recalls the sensation of having a body consisting only of bones.
His glowing eye focuses on recreating a moment from his distant past.
He channels the hero who once cut down the Demon Lord. Skeleton lunges forward, trailing a jagged arc of red and purple power. A heavy, blood-red energy strike cuts through the freezing air. A low rumble sounds as the massive battlefield erupts in chaos. Radiant slashes of energy illuminate the peaks under a crimson sky. Skeleton dives toward the earth, unleashing the power of Ascalon. A floating fragment of stone is engulfed in a swirling vortex.
A massive explosion thunders through the mountains, sending up plumes of snow.
Harrier looks down at Murren, promising that everything will be well. Her orange eye narrows as she tries to believe there are no problems.
Bloodstained hands desperately grip a mangled and heavily bleeding torso.
A wet, choking sound follows as blood spills from a dying mouth. Harrier begs Murren to stay quiet, panicking because the bleeding won't stop. She cries out in frustration as blood continues to spray the snow.
A frantic voice begs for the organs and blood to stay inside.
The desperate pleading continues as the blood keeps pouring out uncontrollably.
Cradling the black-haired girl, Harrier begs Murren not to die.
Soma's boots approach as he mocks her for wailing like a child. Soma looms over the bloody scene, calling her a pathetic wretch. Harrier vows to kill him, leaving the warrior briefly confused. Her eyes glow with rage as she promises he will die by her hand. A sharp crack sounds as Soma's face contorts with sudden, violent anger. Soma swings his blade down toward the kneeling, defenseless pair.
The warrior gasps in surprise as a new presence enters the fray.
Harrier stares up with a blood-smeared face and glowing yellow eyes. Soma dismisses her as a savage who knows nothing of true justice.
He puts his full strength into a final, lethal downward swing.
A cold command for death rings out against a backdrop of speed.
A thunderous roar shakes the earth as a massive crater is formed.
A calm, questioning voice echoes through the thick clouds of smoke. A bandaged hand emerges, suggesting a grim alternative if they are considered savages.
The smoke begins to clear from the shattered frozen ground.
Skeleton stands protectively over Harrier, calling the enemy nothing but an ape.
Harrier cries out for her master while a furious Soma screams Skeleton's name. An unseen voice commands a calm head. Skeleton promises to buy Harrier time.
Skeleton's focus remains sharp and calm.
Soma mocks Skeleton for remaining cold-hearted while his comrade falls.
Soma questions why a vengeful spirit loiters.
Soma asks if Skeleton has found a new pet. Soma questions if fallen Empire soldiers deserve pity.
The weight of families waiting lingers. A fleeting moment of guilt passes.
Skeleton chooses duty over personal guilt. Escher mocks Skeleton's selective concern for his minigames.
War's nature has never truly changed.
Skeleton challenges Soma's heartless view of Pal.
A cold, calculating gaze meets Skelkin.
Empty eye sockets hold a grim determination.
Tension builds as the scene shifts.
Energy surges through the frozen peaks.
Skeleton acknowledges war's devastating and merciless nature. Skeleton declares his intent to protect his comrades. He refuses to hesitate any longer. Harrier is urged to make her decision. Purple energy impacts scar the snowy mountains.
A wet, choking sound follows the blood. Harrier desperately calls out to Murren.
Harrier seeks a medic during the brief can.
A bloodied hand touches Harrier in his horror.
Murren tells Harrier to help Skeleton while Harrier pleads for her to stay still.
Murren commands Harrier to leave the field.
Shock registers on Harrier's blood-splattered face.
Murren reminds Harrier of her role as she urges her to go.
Life fades from the black-haired girl. Moran entrusts a future dream to her friends.
A final, desperate wish is passed along.
A heavy silence follows the tragic passing. Tears stream down Harrier's blood-stained face.
A lone warrior weeps over her friend.
Skeleton executes the Wildcat's great rampage technique.
Soma mocks Skeleton's weakening power after fighting Fright.
Soma asks if Skeleton fears for his disciples.
A massive kick descends toward the skull.
Skeleton declares that Harrier will not crumble.
Soma dismisses his words as total foolishness.
Soma claims that baseless encouragement only breaks spirits.
Skeleton rejects the enemy's bleak and cynical perspective. Skeleton defines Harrier as a true Northern warrior.
Purple energy flares in a desperate lunging counter.
Exhaustion from the struggle begins to show.
Soma prepares a final, crushing sword strike. An eye narrows as death seems certain.
Harrier suddenly slashes Soma across the back.
The battle rages on the snowy plains.
Harrier thanks Skeleton for buying time while he calls out her name.
Soma calmly states his head has finally cooled.
A sudden violent spray of blood erupts. Bleeding heavily, Soma curses the brat who wounded him.
A hand roughly seizes Soma's red hair.
Soma declares he will end his foe as a massive white beast looms.
Skeleton watches as Harrier lunges into the front.
Soma's internal monologue addresses his longtime friend, Moran.
He reflects on having far too many things to apologize for.
He recalls the day he fled the mountain.
Soma admits he has only ever owed gratitude and apologies. Soma says he is sorry as an explosion rings out.
Amidst the clashing, Soma repeats his apology.
Soma's apology to Murren echoes Divitul.
Harrier attacks Soma with relentless, focused power. Harrier's glowing yellow eyes burn with resolve.
Two warriors charge across the snowy wasteland.
Soma says he must apologize to Moran endlessly.
The battlefield disappears in a blinding explosion.
Fresh blood stains the cold white snow.
Both warriors impale each other as Soma begins a final thought.
Harrier grips the blade piercing her chest.
Soma grips the blade piercing this body.
Soma continues his final thought as his hand shakes.
Soma strikes Harrier's face in a final stabble.
Soma demands she let go, asking if she intends to die together.
Soma addresses Murren one last time.
A vow to live for a dream remains. Soma screams in a mixture of pain and fury.
Harrier twists her sword deeper into her apite.
A pained grunt escapes Harrier's bloody lips.
Harrier delivers a devastating final killing strike.
Skeleton cries out Harrier's name in shock.
Soma falls as Harrier stands Vren.
Her glowing eye reflects a cold determination.
Harrier tears through the remaining enemy ranks. Energy slashes fill the freezing winter air.
A soldier gasps as Harrier's blade finds its muck.
A dying Soma curses Skeleton as the hooded warrior watches.
Skeleton reaches out toward his fallen comrade.
Harrier continues her massacre of the enemy soldiers.
Narrow passages at the mountain entrance are noted.
The plan to lure enemies into an avalanche is revealed. The dangerous operation is officially entrusted.
Skeleton orders a full and immediate retreat.
A soldier is cut down in mid-flight.
Panic spreads through the fleeing Imperial soldiers.
The masked enemies realize the trap is pen.
Soma realizes they were being lured from the start.
Soma readies his final storm strike.
He looms over the snowy field.
Soma declares that the duel ends.
Harrier initiates her northern hunting technique.
Gentle hands cradle a white bouquet.
Harrier's ultimate flame attack incinerates everything.
A sudden, sharp splash of blood.
A heavy, pained breath is drawn.
The white flowers fall away.
Skeleton asks why there is shouting.
A loud noise echoes across mountains. Skeleton screams for Harrier and Merrick. Harrier's bloodied eyes widen in shock. Massive explosions scar the mountain range.
An observer voices a puzzled sound.
A tattooed hand reaches for a crystal ball, questioning why the pieces are only now beginning to move.
1,000 Imperial attackers.
600 Imperial Vanguard soldiers perish.
A blood-stained axe falls as a wet, choking sound escapes. Silk laments that the Empire is foolish for starting a war instead of uniting for survival.
The chieftain agrees that their enemies are beyond understanding while looking at the snowy horizon.
The warriors dismiss the dead as rabble.
A soldier shouts a fierce war cry.
Orders are given to sound the victory drum and search for survivors while letting the enemy flee.
A quick, heavy footstep crunches down.
Undead warriors confront a lone survivor.
A skeletal soldier obsessician.
A vacant skull looks upward.
A purple flag flies on high.
The skeletal army stands among smoke.
The summoned skeletons begin to disintegrate. Skeleton explains that his power only allows the dead to move.
He describes them as mere corpses swinging weapons without any memory of their lives.
He observes that these warriors were different, standing with their own will and former glory. Skeleton and a survivor agree that the fallen must be shown respect and gratitude.
The Red Cape chieftain orders Skeleton to stand down if he plans to hold funerals for them.
The bald chieftain explains that these men originally fell on this battlefield before rising once more.
He states that sleeping on the battlefield is their greatest honor.
He jokes that the dead might beat them in Valhalla if they are handled carelessly. A soldier asks if someone is okay while the chieftain notes families will build graves from belongings.
Narration reflects on taking from the land and the selfishness of not giving back upon death.
A quiet, somber agreement is voiced.
Skeleton looks at the sky, remembering the kind of people they were. The chieftain approaches the kneeling grill. Harrier responds with a salford.
The leader thanks her for defending the homeland against the Imperial wolves and apologizes for misjudging her strength.
He asks her what she has left after losing so much in battle.
Harrier looks at her palm, saying she received something far too great. She clenches her fist, admitting the burden is almost crushing.
Silence settles over the frozen mountains. Skeleton suggests returning to the village.
Fireworks illuminate the snowy sky above the village as a series of sudden celebratory pops echo through the night.
Amidst the celebration, a scarred soldier notes that the rascal Vector only fell after cutting down 10 men, while his comrade adds that the way he fought with a spear lodged in his gut was a sight to behold. Nearby, a man cheers that such a feat is fitting for a northern warrior, as mugs are slammed together with a heavy clatter, while voices ring out promising to see their stupid faces again soon with boisterous laughter. A voice notes that they ended the war in one piece and deserve a reward, punctuated by a sudden, fierce shout.
The red-haired Harrier stares pensively, admitting that she sometimes misses these festival-like funerals. As people dance joyfully around a bonfire beneath the fireworks, she reflects that down south, everyone only wept in grief and remained bound by their mementos.
Harrier turns to Skeleton and asks if he knows why northern funerals are so lavish. Skeleton answers that it is because the place they live is always close to death, and sending comrades off in trembling fear would be too sorrowful an end. Skeleton continues, stating that is why Muran would want Harrier to smile instead of cry. Harrier remains silent in the dim light.
Harrier looks at her own hand and notes that Muran's dream has been entrusted to her.
She claims that crumbling in tears would be an insult to Muran, who would likely smack her on the head for it.
Skeleton agrees that Muran would be angry with him as well while he looks down at his bony hand.
A vision of a blonde warrior in a red cape reflects on the comrades who fought beside him in life.
The vision continues, honoring the family who taught and raised him. The memory fades with the thought that they would surely be furious. Skeleton apologizes to Harrier for not properly watching over Muran's final moments.
He looks away from the dancing villagers, admitting he was afraid he might lose himself.
Harrier responds that they must exist as themselves.
Skeleton adds that they must keep moving forward and remember those who are watching over them.
He raises a wooden mug, dedicating a toast to those beyond who have entrusted them with their dreams.
Looking out at the village, he declares that they will be watching as he chooses to walk the thorn-covered path of a hero rather than the easy road of a revenant.
Skeleton gives a small smile and tells Harrier she must smile too because Muran would want that. Harrier offers a simple, soft agreement.
Harrier tells Skeleton to eat his fill while she steps out to attend to a personal matter.
Harrier sits alone, hunched over in contemplation.
She looks at her tattooed arm and realizes that she can only now truly see her master's precarious state.
A distorted, glitching image of Skeleton appears as she worries he could return to the murderous fiend she first met at any moment.
Seeing Skeleton's silhouette, she reflects that she sees not only the hopes entrusted to him, but also the desires being forced onto him.
Harrier remains deep in somber thought.
Harrier wonders what she should do next.
Inside a grand hall, several chieftains sit at a long table as someone notes the presence of several empty seats.
The bald red sheep chieftain, Red Silk, explains that Mother Mountain is vast and some tribes simply could not arrive in time.
A large warrior in a fur-lined helmet and heavy armor, Dugo Rexar of the Dawn Sky Tiger tribe, welcomes the undead one from the lowlands.
Harrier thinks to herself that she has only ever seen this tribe mentioned in books.
Skeleton notes that they are one of the tribes whose lineage has been passed down since ancient times.
Dugo introduces their priest or shaman who has arrived to give Skeleton an item after seeing his future.
Dugo admits he does not know what the possessing spirit told her to make her push herself so hard. Skeleton holds a purple wooden talisman as the shaman tells him to take it, for he will surely need it one day. The old woman reaches out and firmly shakes Skeleton's skeletal hand.
She addresses him as ancestor and questions what kind of past he lived to choose such a future.
Red Silk looks on in confusion, asking what she means by calling him an ancestor.
The old woman chuckles, telling the chieftain to remain ignorant since Skeleton clearly does not wish to reveal the truth himself.
The Dawn Sky Tiger members bow as they vow to devote their strength to his journey, addressing him as the messenger of bones and calling it their karmic burden. Red Silk declares that the Dawn Sky Tiger, Red Sheep, and White Lion main tribes will stand by him, and he will take responsibility for bringing the other chieftains as well.
Red Silk turns his attention to the final matter on hand.
A red-haired prisoner in a white straitjacket and heavy chains is led into the room as the question of what to do with the prisoners is raised with a sharp clink of metal.
Skeleton looks up at the restrained prisoner.
The red-haired prisoner looks down with a dark, sharp-toothed grin and asks to take part in Skeleton's war.
Warning text regarding illegal content distribution. A thought bubble questions a mysterious sound outside the snowy mountain hall. Skeleton observes that the prisoner is serious, while Frey asks what he is thinking. Frey smirks from his restraints, declaring his intent to defect and join their war. Harrier shouts a fierce refusal, warning Skeleton never to trust a man. Harrier explains that Frey is an imperial knight and a primary instigator of the conflict.
Memories of a ruined castle surface as Harrier describes Frey's history of destroying nations for sport.
Skeleton dismisses him as a lunatic, but Frey laughs while admitting he finds weak kingdoms boring.
Skeleton asks for the true reason why Frey wants to side with them. Frey explains that his motivation is simple. He wants to continue the war.
Frey mocks their meager force, questioning if they can truly challenge a continent-ruling empire. He points out the overwhelming power of the Empire's strategic orders and legions.
Frey notes that even conscripted citizens become a formidable force when shoved onto a battlefield.
The Tiger Chieftain demands to know why Frey would choose the underdog side.
Frey grins against a red backdrop, stating their side looks far more entertaining.
He explains that war loses its point once one side has an overwhelming advantage. A vision of a chaotic battle appears as Frey compares clashing wills to a symphony.
Harrier screams that the man is insane and should never be accepted.
Skeleton addresses the prisoner by name to confirm his identity.
Skeleton accepts Frey as a mercenary, prompting a joyful Yahoo from the prisoner, while a chieftain's fist slams the table with a heavy bang.
Red Silk argues that Skeleton cannot unilaterally decide to release a key Imperial prisoner.
Skeleton notes that war-crazed men like Frey think beyond the bounds of ordinary logic.
Skeleton acknowledges Harrier's anger and the difficulty of accepting such a recruit.
He tells the girl to maintain a cool head and not let rage blind her judgment.
Skeleton asks if she is disappointed that her heroic tale has become a dirty brawl.
Skeleton asks if the harsh reality of using hired butchers bothers her.
Dugo Rexar agrees that a knight is a major asset, stating emotions have no place on the battlefield.
Skeleton speaks of his resolve to protect his comrades and topple the Empire.
He declares his willingness to wield even demonic power to ensure their victory.
Skeleton stands over fallen armor, telling Harrier to remember this lesson if she becomes a chieftain.
He defines the heavy, solitary responsibility that comes with being a general.
Harrier clenches her fist and offers a somber apology for her earlier foolishness.
Frey laughs at Skeleton's veteran tone, while Skeleton ponders the remark in silence.
A dark silhouette remembers a life spent entirely within the heart of war.
The other chieftains express their deep concern regarding an uncontrollable mercenary who might betray them.
The bald leader asks Skeleton if he has a specific method to restrain the prisoner.
Skeleton mentions that he has already received advice on the matter. He refers to a way to handle unruly beasts like the red-haired mite.
Exhausted by the long discussion, the chieftain adjourns the meeting for a brief break.
The leaders discuss the priest's vision before ordering the prisoner back to the cells under double guard.
A heavy wooden door opens with a long, high-pitched creep.
A white-haired woman with facial tattoos watches from a window, asking if they managed to talk.
Banson tells her to stop dwelling on pointless thoughts as he enters the room. Banson mentions Harrier has recently set aside her shield, prompting a question from the scarred woman.
The woman notes that Harrier takes after her husband more than herself.
Banson looks at a large, sheathed sword leaning against the wooden law.
The woman identifies the blade as her husband's, noting Harrier previously only imitated her own style.
She takes a somber drag from her pipe, admitting to a lingering regret. She watches the pair walk into the distance, wishing she had spoken more with her child.
The scene ends as the window frame settles into silence.
A grand wooden lodge stands amidst the snow. Harrier speaks softly as she visits Murren's flower stringclave. Watching from the woods, she admires her master's tireless drive and the weight of his peaceful dream.
Harrier looks down, admitting her own painful shortcomings compared to him. She remembers her recent outburst, regretting that she allowed emotions to cloud her judgment. Gazing at the horizon, she reflects on her inherited duty to become a tribal chieftain.
She vows not to aim lower than the dream, for it would dishonor her northern heritage. Harrier resolves to become worthy of the title Hawker. Standing before the headstone, she asks Murren to wait for her just a while longer.
Harrier stands alone in quiet contemplation.
A voice suddenly calls out to her. Banson approaches through the woods, carrying a sheathed blade. Banson explains the chieftain sent a gift, while Harrier wonders what it could be. Banson presents the weapon, identifying it as the sword her father once wielded. Harrier silently received the heirloom. Banson praises her current state, believing she is ready to conquer the Great Hunt. He envisions her as a future chieftain and a legendary warrior of the North. Banson acknowledges her upcoming journey alongside the messenger.
He describes her companion's masterful perspective, suggesting she will learn much on their travels.
Banson encourages her to go, promising that the Great Hunt can wait for her return. Tightening her grip on the hilt with a quick, firm clench, Harrier thanks him. Harrier asks him to guard the estate, which the old man readily accepts. Banson questions the current whereabouts of the skeletal warrior. Harrier looks toward the hall, noting the ongoing meeting to determine their path. She observes that the discussion is taking longer than she anticipated. Inside the hall, Red Silk notes their lack of naval power, prompting a question from Skeleton. Three muscular men strike dramatic poses as they volunteer the Deep Blue Sea Tribe's fleet. Skeleton stares in bewilderment as a loud, dramatic bam echoes through the room. Red Silk identifies the group as the only naval force among the northern tribes. He describes them as seasoned veterans of the Seed. After Red Silk warns they are simple-minded, the Navy leader laughs at how straightforward the plan has become. The boomeranging leader promises to stir the waters and carry them across the open ocean.
Skeleton politely declines, stating his intention to travel exclusively by land.
The Sea Tribe leader freezes in total shock.
As the warriors cry out aloud, "Gya! No!" Skeleton explains he has a specific stop to make.
Red Silk realizes the next destination is officially decided. Banson tells Harrier they are heading to the town where the Master's old sword was forged. Banson reveals the history of the place they are going.
Master and disciple share a moment of silent resolve.
Red Silk promises to mobilize the other chieftains and await Skeleton's orders.
Skeleton and Red Silk exchange parting wishes while the sea leader still shouts about the ocean.
Harrier stands ready to depart.
Red Silk offers Harrier final advice, admitting it feels bold to still call himself her master.
He explains that even a legendary being like Skeleton is human and needs someone to lean on.
A dark vision depicts the warrior raging over his family and disciple.
The vision shows him fighting off the internal urge to become a mindless demon.
Red Silk notes that he has stayed cold and isolated for the sake of his cause.
Red Silk tells the girl to watch the man who struggles so hard to keep his soul.
He declares that such a person is the definition of a true hero.
Tightening her grip with a sharp, heavy clench, Harrier reflects on the word hero.
Chieftain says her first companions have long since vanished to the wind, so keep righteous people by her side now, as it is the duty of those who remain.
Frey looks up with a sharp gaze.
Mern's most important dream is presented. Frey complains loudly about shame. Frey whines that his restraint gear makes it impossible to move quickly, while Skeleton tells him to save his breath.
Skeleton notes that no one is slowing down and tells the knight to stop whining since he traveled fine for days.
Frey chants for a war to hurry as Skeleton commands him a declare.
Frey stares in silent, focused anticipation.
A massive long-necked beast looms over the traveling group.
The trio continues their trek through the dense forest. A multi-eyed purple worm emerges from the earth before them. They ascend a steep and treacherous snowy mountain path.
A giant horned bull monster blocks their way through the tall grass.
The journey continues under a brilliant and vast starlit sky. Skeleton hoists a rabbit intended for the evening's dinner.
Skeleton orders them to camp and prepare while Frey responds with a mocking acknowledgement.
A bright campfire crackles with intense orange energy.
Sitting by the fire, Frey asks Skeleton where he heard the secret about their children.
Skeleton looks back as Frey repeats the question about the information source.
Skeleton questions why the knight waited until this moment to ask.
Frey admits he waited for the girl to step away because her constant guarding prevented a good opportunity. Skeleton mentions hearing a particular story from an old friend.
He explains he went to seek the truth in person.
Fallen knights lie scattered across a cold, snowy battlefield. A strange, formless energy drifts through the white void.
Narration explains his mother married into a noble house but was killed by his father to stage a poisoning.
His house became the most prestigious in the realm thanks to his mother's sacrifice.
Skeleton observes a fallen warrior as text calls the disciple's death a necessary one.
Claims Skeleton could not accept the death in the same humble way. The dying man looks up and asks Skeleton if that's true. A pair of black boots stand still in the smell.
The man wheezes in pain as Skeleton watches him from a seated position.
Skeleton reflects that he initially found the knight's logic impossible to understand.
Frey reflects on the absurdity of declaring war on an empire over a dead disciple.
He admits he once thought Skeleton was stupid or ignorant, but realized he was neither.
Frey concludes that Skeleton was simply searching for a reason to keep living.
He notes Skeleton is already dead and bound here, yet wanted to mingle with the world, deducing that the hero's death was the necessary one he needed.
Frey tells Skeleton to be savage.
Frey scoffs at the idea of a master needing a disciple's death as utterly absurd.
Skeleton tells the Imperial Lapdog to listen well.
Skeleton declares that his silence does not mean he is not angry or that he has forgiven him.
He states that sparing him for a time does not mean the past is forgotten.
Skeleton vows that for taking the lives of 2 disciples, Frey will pay the price even after death.
Frey spits blood with a sharp and defiant pah.
Frey erupts into a long, mocking, and hysterical laugh. Frey asks if the axe wielder died as well.
He notes the tattooed woman wasn't on the hero's level, but seemed fairly skilled.
Frey laughs at the sentimental northern monkeys who throw their lives away for comrades.
He mocks that the axe wielder grew stronger because Frey killed his comrade, claiming the credit for his growth.
Skeleton's hand clenches his cloak in silent, boiling rage.
The fallen warrior tells his skeletal master that while everyone gets wounded, most eventually return to their ordinary lives once they have healed.
Amidst a display of fireworks over the snowy mountains, the master admits that the current tragedy happened because he failed to follow that simple wisdom.
The dying man gasps for air as a firm, choking grip tightens around his neck.
Skeleton reflects on the mistake he made by sparing the man in the past, deciding to end his life completely after asking a few final questions.
In the woods, Red Silk asks if the knight revealed the secret regarding their children so easily.
Skeleton prepares a rabbit for dinner, noting that the knight was quite clear and forthcoming in his explanation.
Red Silk remains skeptical, doubting that such a man would ever answer a question so willingly.
Skeleton simply questions who can truly know the hidden intentions of another.
He explains that he'd merely asked with kindness, even as a dark and menacing energy surges around him. A sharp blade slices cleanly through the raw meat on the cutting board.
Blood spatters across the snow-dusted ground as the master claims the man responded with equal kindness. Skeleton continues to chop the meat into small pieces with a steady, practiced hand. Bound tightly in white cloth and sitting by the crackling fire, Harrier asks what happened next in the story. Skeleton carefully adds the prepared pieces of meat into a large cooking pot over the flames.
A low, satisfied chuckle sounds as the stew begins to bubble intensely over the fire.
When Harrier asks what he finds so funny, the skeletal warrior admits he is simply looking forward to what is coming. Frey carries heavy barrels through the woods while Red Silk remarks that his disciple likely views him as a true hero.
She cynically notes that society calls a man a murderer for one death but a hero for 10,000, wondering when the disciple will realize this truth.
Skeleton accepts her challenge and vows to watch the path ahead together until the very end. He tells her to watch closely as the evening meal continues to cook in the pot.
A bright star streaks across the night sky while Frey stands alone beneath a large tree, reflecting on his own eventual end.
The morning sun shines through the lush green leaves of the forest canopy as a new day begins. Stepping onto the dusty path, Skeleton announces that they have finally reached their destination.
They look up at the bright, cloudy sky over the relay village of Luprit.
The group approaches the massive stone walls of the village on the hill to resupply their provisions. Skeleton suddenly tells the others to hold their position as they approach the entrance. Adjusting her new attire, Harrier complains about the extreme discomfort and asks to change back into her original clothes. Skeleton orders her to stop whining, explaining that her previous restraint gear would draw too much attention from the Empire's knights.
He adjusts his own hood and mask, insisting they maintain a low profile and leave the village as quickly as possible.
Frey questions the wisdom of their approach, but Skeleton warns that trying to sneak in would only cause a greater mess if they were caught. He gives a confident thumbs up, boasting that no one could possibly see through his perfect disguise.
His confidence is immediately shattered as several sharp spearheads are leveled at his chest.
Surrounded by armed guards in an open field, Skeleton mutters a quiet curse at their sudden misfortune.
A large monster hound lets out a fierce territorial growl with a sharp ah.
The guards report that their hounds have detected the unmistakable stench of the undead, prompting a confused reaction from Skeleton.
Skeleton raises his bandaged hands in a gesture of surrender as the guards close in.
A high-ranking watchman intervenes, taking custody of the travelers and ordering his subordinates to let them pass. Mangil, the watchman of Liberate Village, tells the group to follow him into the town. As they walk through the streets, Mangil identifies Skeleton as the Wraith of Spear Tower Village based on rumors he has heard.
He mentions his own past as an adventurer and the news he still receives from old friends who remained in the guild.
Mangil recounts an unbelievable story he heard about an undead being convincing a guildmaster to rise up against the Empire.
He offers to help them reach the Street of Artisans, noting it is the usual destination for visiting adventurers. Skeleton expresses his sincere gratitude for the watchman's unexpected assistance.
Mangil checks a nearby street clock and instructs them to meet him at the tavern after sunset.
Skeleton insists on following him immediately, fearing they will be arrested if they wander the village alone. The watchman relents to their persistence and tells them to do as they please.
A woman in the square sings a song about the grand dreams of youth and the bitter reality faced by aging warriors. Looking down at the stone amphitheater, Mangil calls it a hopeful yet bitter song. Sitting on the stone steps, he tells Skeleton that the song reflects the lives of people exactly like them. He speaks of the young adventurers who set out with dreams of protecting their families and hunting fearsome dragons.
Mangil reflects on his life as a village watchman crushed by reality. He admits that their only comfort is drinking and the bard's song.
Skeleton encourages him to keep moving forward and never abandon his ideals. He claims that people only fail when they stop chasing their dreams.
Mangil tells the traveler that he makes such things sound far too simple.
Skeleton shocks the watchman by claiming he has reached that final destination himself. He offers to buy dinner in exchange for a shortcut to the Artisans.
The skeletal warrior looks forward to finally enjoying a proper meal.
Mangil watches them walk away and calls them a very strange lot. Birds fly through the crimson sky as the sun begins to set. Mangil sits alone on the amphitheater steps long after the music stops. The tired watchman decides it is finally time for him to gab.
The female bard speaks from the shadows, noting his habit of lingering. Mangil is startled as the woman makes a sudden personal request.
The brown-haired bard blushes and asks him to escort her home. He realizes that his colleagues would be shocked to hear such a thing. She reveals that he is actually quite famous among the townspeople.
Mangil laughs off the idea, calling the village watch a group of failures.
He wonders why she chose him out of all the other watchmen.
She explains that she sees the eyes of a hero in him.
The bard tells him she likes his innocent and childlike eyes. Mangil is stunned into silence by her unexpected and kind praise. He begins to realize that he might still have a hero's heart. He turns back and asks her to repeat what she just said. The woman smiles playfully and calls him incredibly slow to understand.
She repeats that he is indeed very slow to catch on.
The watchman's eyes widen as she suddenly takes his hand in hers. The blushing man is completely flustered and tells her the way.
The two run off together to enjoy their first date through the village.
The red sunset fades over the rooftops of the Relay Village buildings.
Skeleton looks on with a confused and speechlessly bewildered expression.
Mangil and the bard arrive together, leaving the skeletal traveler totally baffled.
Mangill assists the group by reviewing a map of the region on the table.
Skeleton watches Harrier celebrate wildly with the other patrons in the background.
The tavern atmosphere grows rowdy as Harrier continues her celebratory dancing.
Skeleton is skeptical as Harrier participates in an acrobatic human tower.
The red-headed girl laughs while drinking foam-covered ale from a mump.
The travelers and locals engage in various festive and chaotic guild activities.
A soft, dismissive sounds as Skeleton looks away from the noisy revelry.
Frey brings more drinks and notes that his master seems happy for once.
Skeleton admits that a pleasant memory simply came to his mind.
Frey mentions that he once met Skeleton's first disciple, the blonde hearer.
He recalls being on a dangerous solo mission when he was nearly defeated.
Frey explains that the hero suddenly appeared and saved his life from a monster.
Skeleton listens quietly as his disciple describes the hero's upright nature.
Frey admits that he often struggles to understand the meaning of justice.
He wonders what is truly right in a world filled with war.
Frey muses on how wonderful it would be to live ordinary days together. He wishes they had all been born into a more peaceful era.
Skeleton remains silent, knowing he started this war to end all future bloodshed. In a vision of the past, Mangill laughs with his comrades while reflecting that he is content for the current era to bleed if it ensures peace for the next generation, praying that all sin falls upon him so others may be blessed.
Skeleton admits that the self-sacrificial prayer is the same one he carries into every battlefield.
He points upward, noting that he is currently embarking on his second attempt to achieve that goal.
Frey asks what became of the first attempt, and Skeleton explains that his lifelong struggle for peace ultimately failed, lasting barely a century.
Looking at his gloved palm, Skeleton insists they must fight for the coming age even if his own hands are already stained beyond cleansing. Outside the village buildings at night, Frey offers his respect, and Skeleton jokingly invites more praise.
The scene shifts to a peaceful night landscape over 100 kilometers from the village center.
Above the stone fortifications of Libret, a faint tremor is suddenly detected coming from the southwest.
A massive monster emergence is confirmed, with an estimated 300 beasts approaching the walls.
A vertical slit yellow eye dilates with predatory hunger in the darkness.
A pack of muscular green monsters with glowing white eyes charges forward through the night.
One of the creatures leers toward its prey with a long dripping time. An ominous notification warns that the natural disaster known as a monster wave is manifesting.
During the day, a woman's voice calls out from a house, wishing someone luck on their shift and asking to meet at the square later.
Mangill blushes as he speaks with the bard, who thanks him for his kindness.
The bard tells him to take care as she walks away, and Mangill stammers that he will see her tonight.
The watchman stands alone with a dazed, love-struck expression on his face.
Martyr calls him a lucky bastard for escaping the single life, though Mangill tells him to be quiet.
Leaning against the stone, Martyr wonders what kind of heroic past or sorcery Mangill used to land an idol like her.
As the travelers pass through, Martyr shouts for the Heartstealer to share his secrets, but Mangill insists he did nothing.
Mangill turns back to find a messenger arriving at the gate in a horse-drawn cart.
The watchman's expression darkens as he reads a piece of paper handed to him by the traveler.
The horse pulls the cart silently through the shadows of the village archway.
Looking out over the walls, Martyr asks Mangill what he plans to do about his future.
Martyr warns that the village is still under the Empire's tyranny and could fall at any time, making it a dangerous place for a family.
He muses that perhaps in this era, building a happy home is nothing more than an impossible dream.
Mangill dismisses the concern, stating that the state of the era does not matter to him.
He smiles, declaring that any era is fine as long as he is with her, before being startled by a sudden interruption.
The scene shifts to the village square where several people are gathered and several people are gathered in the dirt.
The group focuses on a rider, questioning what has happened as they approach.
A hand is shown dripping with a thick, ominous black fluid. The notice board of the local Adventurers Guild is covered in fluttering reports.
Skeleton points out a blood-stained message, identifying it as the guild communication taken from the messenger's corpse.
Mangill realizes a monster wave has destroyed a neighboring village and warns that it will reach Libret in less than 30 minutes.
Skeleton asks if a monster wave refers to creatures appearing gradually over time.
Red Silk explains that they used to hunt monsters in the forest for population control before they could gather in large numbers.
Mangill clarifies that the current situation is on a completely different scale, a disaster occurring after containment has failed.
He recalls the past when night orders and adventurers would easily call the monsters before they accumulated. The memory of those orderly days shatters like glass, signaling that the era of protection is over.
Mangill criticizes the Empire for cowering behind capital walls and running a system that ignores the provinces.
Skeleton realizes that adventurers must now bear the full burden of protecting their crumbling hometowns alone.
Mangill notes that the only people left to defend the village are watchmen and dedicated adventurers.
He laments that a failing nation has no talent left, leaving only frontier watchmen like themselves to face the coming end.
A sharp clang sounds as a man bursts through the guild doors, shouting that things are bad.
He orders everyone to arm themselves and assemble in the square as the wave is sighted at the western wall.
Boots scramble across the floor as orders are given to wake the sleeping guards and begin evacuating the residents.
Skeleton tells Mangill there is no more time for talk, and the watchman grimly agrees. Skeleton uses a map to plan a strategy of circling the monsters to funnel them into a single point and minimize damage.
The skeletal warrior asks for Mangill's help, and the watchman simply pleads for success.
Mengel's eyes narrow with focus as he calls out to someone named Gastatori to look at the approaching threat.
Blood spatters the quest board, detailing a state-issued mission without any reward or backing.
Beside a soldier, the hooded man predicts everyone will bail as casualties, Raz.
Ignoring the grim news, the hooded man tells the armored soldier, Mangil, to arm himself.
A weathered hand tightens the warrior's face covering. Looking determined, Mangil declares that their village will be protected by their own hands.
A massive boom echoes as the stone defenses begin to crumble. A guttural roar sounds from the beast's gaping maw. The gray-skinned monster towers over the warrior as the battle begins. A sharp blade pierces the creature's flesh. Mangil drives his spear deep into the monster's torso amidst a flurry of motion.
The beast's massive jaws snap shut with a heavy sound.
Grappling the head, Mangil yells that he has it bound but warns it won't hold. Mangil calls to Statori, who readies magical spheres and confirms he is ready to act.
With a quick throw, the spears detonate inside the monster scoff.
A pained shriek sounds as corrosive smoke melts the beast's facial features. A heavy thud sounds as a spear is driven through the creature's skull.
Mangil notes the monsters are far larger and more dangerous than any previous wave.
Scowling, Mangil curses the Empire for their betrayal.
Looking over the field, Mangil realizes the threat level was intentionally downgraded to lure them. A sudden tremor sounds, prompting Mangil to question the source of the shaking.
A massive clawed foot crushes the earth with a heavy thud.
A giant glowing eye focuses on the battlefield.
Panic ensues as a massive wyvern descends, devouring a soldier.
Warriors scream for a retreat, realizing they cannot handle the flying beast.
One soldier tries to rally the defense while another despairs over their certain death.
Steely-eyed, Mangil orders the evacuation, admitting the village is lost.
Mangil watches silently as his comrades flee the doomed Sedor. A vision of a smiling woman with red hair briefly crosses his mind.
A sharp clack sounds as an abandoned helmet hits the dirt.
Gazing at the dragon's teeth, the warrior confirms his suspicions about the end. Facing the wyvern alone, Mangil admits that fighting is all he understands.
During the chaos, a soldier bellows for everyone to flee toward the north gate. A woman frantically asks where Mangil is, noting the speed of their retreat. Statori reveals that Mangil remained behind to continue the fight.
Grabbing Statori's cloak, the soldier demands he explain what is happening.
Looking down, Statori explains that Mangil stayed to buy them time for their escape.
Covered in blood, Mangil sprints across the Kharkov.
A bright flash sounds as the warrior charges into the fray.
Mangil lunges at the colossal beast with his spear.
A flurry of motion follows as Mangil hacks at the creature's petite.
A massive boom echoes as the wyvern's tail strikes the ground.
Blood sprays as Mangil manages to wound the dragon's flank.
The beast roars as it prepares another assault. Jumping through the air, Mangil narrowly avoids a crushing blow. A heavy thud sounds as the spear impacts the rocky floor.
Mangil resolves to use every ounce of his remaining strengths.
Blue electricity crackles as Mangil raises his spear for a final gamble. He unleashes a lightning spear electric strike against the monstrous wyvern.
Lightning illuminates the warrior's face during the intense clash.
As the wyvern screams, Mangil reflects on a faintly glowing dream. A thunderous, ground-shaking boom echoes as the dragon recoils from the assault. The red-haired woman smiles softly as she recalls a person who believed in her dream. A steady, rhythmic drip sounds as blood falls from his wounded hand.
Determined, despite the gore on his face, Mangil vows that he will not give up.
The watchman stares ahead with unwavering focus.
His hands tighten their grip on his spear.
A heavy, sudden thud sounds as he takes a decisive step forward.
Mangil reflects on a dream of battling an endless tide of monstrous creatures. His singular focus remains on slaying the dragon to save his village. Mangil charges headlong toward the towering, single-eyed guide. A massive, echoing boom sounds as the Cyclops strikes the cracked earth. A wet, sickening crunch sounds as the spear pierces deep into the giant's eye. Leaping through the air, Mangil continues his quest to rescue the princess. A fierce, terrifying intensity radiates from the warrior's shadowed gaze.
A sharp, heavy thud sounds as a goblin stabs Mangil from behind.
The green-skinned goblin cackles maliciously as its blade sinks into the warrior's back. While striking back at his assailant, Mangil declares that the dragon is already dead. Mangil grunts in pain while the Cyclops unleashes a deafening, agonized scream. The massive giant looms over the warrior in the open air. A final thunderous boom sounds as the impact resonates across the wasteland. A soft rhythmic drip sounds as blood falls from the spear tip to the dirt.
Covered in blood, Mangil leans heavily on his spear to stay upright.
Exhaustion pulls the warrior's head down as he struggles to stay conscious. He looks up with eyes clouded by blood and weariness. The watchman finally collapses to his knees amidst the ruins. A ragged, heavy panting sounds as he gaps for air.
Mangil weakly claims his duty is done as monsters surround his kneeling form.
A sudden, violent strike cuts through the air with blinding speed.
Multiple legendary combat styles are unleashed as the warriors join the fray.
A flurry of elemental slashes and pierces devastates the approaching monster horde.
While one warrior gaggingly complains about monster flesh in his mouth, Frey suggests he treat it as protein to grow his brain, causing Skeleton to order them to stop bickering.
The masked skeletal master acknowledges the presence of the battered watchman.
Skeleton praises Mangil's strength for holding back the horde alone while the watchman stammers in disbelief.
Recognition flashes in Mango's eyes as he realizes who has arrived.
Skeleton explains that the Watchmen's brave stand allowed them to easily flank the enemy forces. Mangle smiles as Skeleton informs him of the successful evacuation and commends him for exceeding his duty.
Skeleton tells the weary warrior to rest while they deal with the remaining trash.
Harrier and Frey stand ready to sweep away the rest of the monster army.
The scene shifts to the ruins near the southwestern wall of Libert Village. The once peaceful settlement has been transformed into a war-torn wasteland.
Mangle watches the ensuing spectacle with a sense of complete shock. The Watchman observes the skull-masked figure in the Laughing Woman as they dominate the battlefield. Mangle notes that the powerful monsters are falling like autumn leaves, feeling awe rather than despair.
A profound sense of awe overflows in the Watchman's heart as he watches them. Skeleton observes that while the Watchman's eyes were empty yesterday, they have now completely changed.
Frey notes that the Watchman now possesses the eyes of someone who has found something to protect. As they face a massive multi-headed beast, Frey tells him to protect his purpose and survive, distinguishing between dying while protecting and protecting until the end.
Frey unleashes a high-speed strike with his flexible whip-like blade.
The red-haired youth strikes with incredible reach and precision.
The blade bites into the massive creature's thick red scales. A small blade is deeply embedded in the monster's red leg.
Frey pulls a cord tight, telling someone to live without his reprets.
Mangle stares upward with an expression of pure wide-eyed shock.
Harrier is launched high into the air toward the giant beast.
Harrier prepares a northern hunting technique while falling toward her target.
A purple-clad warrior readies a spear to strike a hairy monster. A massive blow impacts the side of the giant red monster.
A weary warrior exhales a sharp, breathy sound.
Frey admits that he cannot fight with the skill Murin once had.
A group of gray, muscular monsters charges forward across the plains. The gray monsters loom over the fallen body of the red beast.
Frey is caught in a blinding flash while crying out, "Ooh-ah!" in surprise.
A monster's head is crushed with a sudden, violent impact. Harrier laughs wildly while shredding through the group of gray monsters.
Frey shouts for Harrier to look around while moving because it's dangerous. Harrier retorts that only weaklings worry about things like danger.
Harrier reveals she is one of the Empire's 4 knights, the Knight of War.
Harrier fearlessly leaps directly through the open jaws of a monster. Harrier lets out a puff as she is blown back by a strike.
Smaller monsters swarm around the base of the giant red monster's leg. A glowing core of energy pulses brightly within the monster's red hide.
The giant red monster leers with predatory hunger and glowing white eyes.
A massive energy strike cuts through the air with a swirling motion. A thick rain of blood pours down over the remaining beasts. A figure walks through the carnage as heavy thuds echo.
A black boot steps firmly into the blood-soaked red earth.
Harrier stands drenched in blood, her wide eyes staring blankly forward. The massive monster towers over the distant mountain peaks at twilight.
Frey slashes through a monster with a command to move that.
Frey resolves to use the girl as a mercenary in the future.
A council leader firmly opposes using an uncontrollable mercenary who might betray them.
Harrier celebrates finding her severed leg while a leader notes the need for control. Drenched in blood, Harrier pauses to consider something she heard about herself.
Harrier wipes her face as she reflects on a past conversation. Frey realizes the blood was absorbed to reattach Harrier's leg and heal her.
Harrier is identified as the Knight of War as she tastes the blood.
Frey is named the Knight of War and hungrily asks to fight again.
Harrier offers combat advice to Frey after observing his movements earlier.
Frey scoffs at receiving advice from a brat who uses rotation attacks.
Skeleton watches from afar as the two engage in a childish scuffle.
A sudden, loud shout from Mangle startles the dazed Mautern.
The bard asks how Mangle arrived, and he credits the other defenders. Mangle asks about the village and is relieved to hear it is fine.
The bard explains Skeleton cleared the path while others defended the gorge.
She scolds Mangle for recklessly charging at a wyvern 1. Mangle dismisses his injuries, claiming he only fell and scraped himself.
Mantle brags about catching a wyvern while the bard remains skeptically angry.
Mangle calls the stories cheap at this price as the bard yells. Mangle silences the bard's frantic shouting with a gentle touch on her chin.
He tells her that his safety is 100 times better than her danger. The brown-haired woman weeps as she confesses her deep longing.
Mangle smiles through his blood, acknowledging that only one task remains.
Frey reflects on his victory over the dragon.
The brown-haired woman insists that she does not need rescuing.
She achieved a forgotten dream because he was there. Frey and the woman share a warm embrace.
Mangle muses that the village is no longer suitable for a happy family and wonders if such a dream is impossible in this era.
A cloak's geometric bands.
Monsters reach toward the light. Skeleton unleashes a powerful technique. A massive blast clears the field.
A green monster screeches, "Quick!" The monster bites a glowing core.
Skeleton stands amidst a fawn.
Skeleton strikes with purple energy.
Skeleton observes that his broken sword can no longer function because it crumbles immediately after being split in half.
He recalls being a glorious hero. Skeleton dismisses their petty tricks as he remembers being a comrade to the heroes who defeated the Demon Lord.
Skeleton's skull glows on the ground. An off-screen voice commands Harrier and Frey to drive the monsters together while Frey reacts in shock.
Harrier tells Frey not to stand around and to use his biggest technique while the young man remains stunned. Harrier and Frey prepare their distinct spiral and northern combat styles.
A massive shockwave hits the monsters.
A wave of green monsters charges.
Skeleton prepares for his turn. Skeleton declares it is his turn while facing the giant.
Skeleton prepares his final move.
A massive strike impacts Seath.
The shockwave sweeps the landscape.
Mountains through the giant's legs.
Skeleton delivers a final flash.
Purple energy tears a leg.
Skeleton curses his basic error as his shattered blade prevents his strike from connecting fully.
A shout calls out to the falling warrior as Harrier leaps into the fray. Harrier reacts in surprise as she and Skeleton plummet through the air. Harrier smiles confidently, asking if it is right to finish the battle Crockley.
Harrier severs the monster's leg.
A purple explosion finishes the giant. Monsters watch the Lent Sun. Failed population control causes the Wraith.
The narrator explains that despite the presence of ultra-large monsters, the disaster resulted in the lowest casualty count ever recorded.
Libret stands safe after the owl.
Libret's flag remains Scardu.
An off-screen voice expresses disappointment over the defender's immediate departure.
Skeleton promises to use the map well and insists there is no time to delay his journey. Mangle wishes Skeleton luck and offers the village's help whenever needed.
Mangle credits the defenders for the village's survival and pledges to use it for a better future.
Mangle declares his intention to build a peaceful nation with his wife once the village is restored.
Skeleton finds the promise reassuring and advises Mangle to fight alongside the armies that will eventually bear that same insignia.
Mangle holds the medallion to his heart and vows that they will stand together when the time finally comes.
Skeleton, Frey, and Harrier bid their final farewells as the sunset casts a warm glow over the grassy plains.
A hand grips a travel cord tightly, the tension of a new departure hanging in the air.
A crowd of adventurers and watchmen salute Mangle, formally appointing him their commander and staking their collective honor on his leadership as he accepts the order.
Skeleton reflects on the long years past, his gaze fixed on the horizon as the light fades.
Shielding his eyes from the setting sun, Skeleton observes that there are still those in this world who continue to shine.
A bold black ink signature is slashed across a white canvas.
The intricate black brushstrokes of the artisan's mark are shown in close detail.
A lavender-haired woman with facial scars stares off with a bewildered expression. A man carrying a wooden crate asks the lavender-haired woman if there is a problem, to which she nervously replies that there is not.
The muscular, lavender-haired woman places a finger to her lips and dismisses her concern, insisting it is nothing.
The scene shifts to a vast, clear blue sky filled with wispy white clouds.
A sprawling city stands on the horizon, described as the place where the greatest artisans of the continent gather. Heavy industrial chimneys rise above the rooftops of Artisan Street, a place where the fires of creation never go out.
Customers browse a crowded shop where the finest weapons and gear are traded in a bustling commercial hub.
A heavy blacksmith's hammer impacts glowing metal with a loud clang as the narrator describes the never-ending work of the city.
Windmills and industrial towers overlook the terracotta roofs of a city built on fire and steel.
A silver-haired man with heavy stubble remains silent, deep in thought.
Looking over a display of massive broadswords, the master smith lets out a quiet hum of contemplation.
The silver-haired master smith calls for Doran to join him, and the bandana-wearing youth quickly responds to his master.
Holding up a finished blade, the master smith asks how long it has been since Doran arrived as an apprentice, and the youth confirms it has been just over 7 years.
The master notes that Doran has been a fast learner as he examines the hilt of the sword.
Doran modestly claims he only copied his master's techniques in a rough way, but the silver-haired man firmly declares that he has passed. Doran looks confused as the master smith informs him that he is now permitted to carve his own signature into the weapons he creates.
Doran's eyes widen in utter disbelief at the sudden promotion.
Clenching his fist in excitement, the youth asks if the master is truly being serious and won't take the offer back.
The master smith tells him to wipe the dumb look off his face and orders him to buy a new hammer from Artisan Street by tomorrow so he can pass his old one to a junior.
A joyful wah escapes the youth as he performs a celebratory backflip in the background while the master smith grumbles that he is a lunatic.
A hand holds up a large wooden mallet as the narrator explains that a hammer carries a deep significance for an artisan.
Sparks fly as a blacksmith shapes searing steel, working in a realm of heat that human bodies cannot handle bare.
A heavy metal hammer strikes the anvil, serving as the lifelong limb an artisan earns at the end of their training.
Doran waves a happy goodbye, heading out for the important rite of buying his first professional hammer. The youth runs out of the shop toward a new beginning as the master watches from the doorway.
Rubbing his head, the master smith expresses a quiet hope that the boy won't get too excited and buy something weird.
Noticing a disturbance outside, the smith wonders what to do with the senile skeleton and asks if someone wants to die by those hands again.
Harrier mocks Skeleton's memory, suggesting his brain has rotted, but the skeletal warrior insists his memories of the shop are clear as the master smith wonders why they are making a fuss outside.
A voice from beneath a dark cloak notes that their arrival is perfectly timed.
The travelers stand before the shop as Skeleton asks if they have reached the Surut Forge.
The master smith welcomes the customers to his humble shop and invites them time to. Leading them through rows of longswords, maces, and armor, the smith explains that while they specialize in weapons, their armor is also top class.
A wooden bucket overflows with standard blades and hilts on the workshop floor.
Frey gasps in surprise as the master smith explains that the shop is unusually quiet because the apprentices are currently out.
Crossing his scarred arms, the master smith asks the travelers what they need from his forge.
Reaching into his cloak with a purple glowing hand, Skeleton decides to get straight to the point.
Pulsing purple energy radiates from the center of Skeleton's palm. Skeleton presents his shattered blade, which is wreathed in violet flames, and asks if the smith can fix it. The scene shifts to the crowded commercial district of Artisan Street, packed with shoppers and laborers.
Doran navigates the busy street, complaining about how packed the area is with people.
The youth stops with a startled gasp as he hears a loud merchant shouting about masterpieces and calling for a line to form. An eye-patched merchant gestures to a display of bizarre hammers, offering the young man a half-price discount for his graduation.
Doran stares with a look of pure, speechless horror at the strange collection of hammers before him.
The gray-haired man advises him to remember these lessons when choosing a hammer in the future.
He lists specific requirements for a quality tool, emphasizing the need for plain metal, a sturdy wooden handle, and perfect balance to prevent injury.
The young man with the black bandana listens intently as his master warns that the world won't protect a foolish artisan's wealth.
He examines various hammers that fail the test, noting flaws like ornate carvings, metal handles, and poor weight distribution. In the bustling marketplace, the young man insults a shady vendor, suggesting his forge fire should burn something far more personal than steel. Relieved he avoided a scam, the apprentice resolves to scour every inch of the commercial district to find his destined tool. The quiet town of Lebret basks under the bright morning sun.
As crows cry out across the sky, the sun begins to set over the peaceful settlement.
Merchants begin to pack their wares and cover their stalls as the day ends. Despairing as his options vanish, the young man is told to move by a vendor closing shop. Gripping his head in frustration, he panics about needing a new hammer for tomorrow's work. Crying out in the middle of the street, he laments the loss of his perfect tool.
He sprints past a quiet, mustached man sitting alone on the ground.
The old man remains solitary and still as the background fades into a soft haze.
Startled by a sudden realization, the young smith stops and looks back at the stranger. His eyes widen at a simple, unadorned hammer with a non-slip wooden handle that seems perfectly balanced.
He is stunned by the incredible craftsmanship, realizing it might even surpass his own master's skill level.
Approaching the old man, he asks if the piece is for sale, and the craftsman welcomes his interest. The apprentice questions why such a skilled artisan is selling his work on a simple mat.
Dismissing the praise, the old man offers the tool for free, claiming he has no need for currency.
Offended, the young man clarifies he isn't a beggar, which genuinely surprises the elder.
With a knowing smile, the craftsman proposes a deal, listen to his story, and then decide if the hammer should be a gift or a purchase.
Looking at the old man's scarred hands, the apprentice wonders if the object carries a dark curse.
The elder begins his tale, recalling his arrival at Artisan Street 40 years ago when he still had a full head of hair.
He reflects on his youth as a rising star in the forge, constantly learning and improving his craft. His life changed when nobles offered him a position as an exclusive smith for decorative weaponry. He explains the sacred, unspoken laws that govern the Guild of the Street. The rules mandate that smiths never bow to nobility, never refuse a student, and always honor their own traditions until the end. Tempted by wealth, the young artisan reached out to take the noble's gold, violating his principles. That moment of greed stripped him of his status as a true artisan of the street. Years passed in a gilded cage where he produced nothing but empty display pieces for palace walls.
A heavy thud sounds as the tool he once loved falls to the ground.
He eventually realized he was no longer a creator, merely an old man left behind by time. With no forge or successor, he felt his spirit had died the moment he abandoned his roots. He eventually reached a final, resolute decision regarding his legacy. Igniting the forge one last time, he poured his entire soul into a single final work.
He acknowledged that a rule breaker like him had no right to officially pass on his techniques.
Driven by the regret of never having a disciple, he decided to search for someone worthy.
He waited in the shadows of the crowd for decades, hoping someone would recognize the quality of his final hammer. Looking at the apprentice, he expresses his satisfaction that the hammer has finally been chosen. He pleads with the young man to take the tool, hoping his own end can facilitate a new beginning. Smiling warmly, he admits it is a great honor for someone like the apprentice to carry his last work. The young man remains silent, deeply moved by the weight of the old man's words.
Back at his own shop, the gray-haired master sighs over the complicated nature of his student's request.
Bursting into the room, the apprentice calls out for his master to witness his find.
A bright flash sounds as he displays the glowing, super special hammer he believes will change his life. The master reacts with utter shock as he takes the simple tool in his hands.
He demands to know where the boy found it, and the apprentice explains it came from the commercial district.
The young man clarifies that he found it on a mat at the very edge of the city.
Cursing under his breath, the master realizes the old man is still capable of producing legendary work.
The master smith awards Doran his status as an artisan.
He clarifies that for now, Doran's work sells under his forge. A wooden sign reading closed hangs on the wall. A scarred hand reaches for the shop's closing sign.
The master smith flips the wooden sign.
A thud sounds as the sign flips go open. The master smith welcomes his guests to Artisan Street. The scene shifts as the group prepares for their next task. Overlooking the rooftops, Skeleton asks if the weapon is irreparable. The smith explains the divine artifact is beyond his expertise. Skeleton recalls the forge's past work on his demonic blade.
The master smith denies any memory of creating the artifact.
Skeleton notes the smith he met lived a century ago. The master smith realizes his visitor is not human.
Skeleton dismisses his non-human nature as currently irrelevant. The smith recalls legends of the founder handling such weapons.
He quotes a message about treating an ageless beef well.
He identifies Skeleton as the protagonist of the unfolding fury. He mentions a banished rulebreaker who could handle divine items.
Harrier complains about the journey being a total waste. The smith assures them that many genuine workshops remain.
Skeleton explains he has already proven himself to the predecessors.
The shattered purple blade rests on the smith's table.
A direction points them toward a specialist in Alley 74. The group seeks the forge of the Banished Master.
They arrive at the forge known as the Godsarf. Harrier stands ready for whatever waits inside the building.
They inspect a collection of morbid and holy items. Harrier points out another strange relic on the wall.
She laughs at the shopkeeper's unique collection of holy relics. While Doran asks if he is all right, Skeleton compares the air to farts from sweet potatoes, leaving Harrier confused.
A voice from the darkness asks if they are customers.
A tattooed hand offers a prayer while lighting a mat.
The hidden figure offers them drinks and commands them forward.
The trio descends into a long pitch-black corridor.
Harrier remarks on the surprising length of the hallway. Doran questions the strange treatment they are receiving as Ustwers.
While Skeleton senses a trap, Harrier asks what he means, and Doran questions why they were told to leave their gear outside.
Skeleton admits he entered the trap on purpose to lure the owner out.
A thud sounds as a tattooed arm reaches from the darkness.
The attacker mocks them for expecting a polite greeting as monsters.
The Inquisitor calls for a purification ritual.
Skeleton screams in pain as he is engulfed in light.
The attacker vows to send the undead back to reincarnation. Doran cries out in panic as his master is attacked.
The tattooed man invokes his divine authority.
Glowing green chains erupt to bind the infruiters.
Doran draws his daggers to deflect the magical bindings.
A metallic rattle sounds as the chains catch Doran dropping.
The warrior stares in shock as the trap fully engages.
Doran cries out as glowing green chains bind him.
The attacker mocks Harrier as her blade is ensnared.
A massive burst of yellow light erupts.
Enveloped in fire, Edward finds the warmth oddly pleasant.
The attacker realizes his advanced purification failed.
A powerful blast forces the combatants to stop.
Edward admits the searing flames actually feel good.
Stepping forward, the undead introduces himself as Edward Vinrilla.
Edward offers to talk instead of continuing the fight.
A dark silhouette chuckles in the shadows.
Gregory laughs at the absurdity of a polite, skull-faced customer.
The tattooed man admits he hasn't laughed this hard. Priest Gregory Gilliman Theo agrees to speak with them.
Gregory notes the break-in divine artifact requires his repair.
He questions how they obtained such a rare item. Edward explains the split sword belonged to an acquaintance.
He admits he cannot use its necromantic abilities effectively. Gregory identifies Edward as a being outside the cycle.
Edward asks if the priest can fix the sword.
Gregory explains his forge's mandatory iron roll.
He demands to hear the owner's story before working.
The priest invites them to tell a worthy tale.
He questions the purpose and protection of his craft. Without knowing the owner, divinity is just metal. Gregory prepares the hearth for their conversation. He sits before the fire, ready for Edward's story.
Edward's tragic past of war and monsters unfolds.
Memories of a girl's happy beach day turn blay.
Edward holds a fallen companion in a moment of grief.
Gregory describes the epic, lonely journey as truly magnificent.
He compares Edward's impossible life to a fairy tale.
Doran and Harrier are stunned by the hidden history.
Gregory claps his tattooed hands, ending the story.
The smith notes certain suspicious details in the account.
He stares intensely through the flickering firelight. A vision of the blonde girl appears within Edward's skull.
Gregory realizes the truth behind Edward's hatred.
He questions Edward's belief in the sword's necromantic power.
The priest claims the sword's power is merely a wish.
He states the evil power originates from the sword.
Doran reacts with bewilderment to the Kree ring.
Gregory creates a small magical flame in his hand.
He touches his forehead with the glowing fire.
A vision of a frozen mountain peak appears.
He describes the origin of fire as an obsession.
Gregory contrasts the miracles of mages and priests. He claims Edward is trapped by a false assumption. Edward's hand shakes as he considers the priest's words. A close-up reveals a glowing, intense purple eye.
Gregory declares that great power belongs to Edward alum.
Skeleton is confronted by a mysterious figure who identifies him as the Demon King. A voice echoing through a grandstone hall shouts about total annihilation. A dark silhouette asks if the Emperor has been notified, learning that it is currently deemed unnecessary. A wide, sinister grin suggests that the matter can be resolved quietly and independently. An angry voice insists the news of the disaster will inevitably reach the Emperor's ears.
The speaker screams in disbelief that an entire army of 1,000 men has gone missing.
A shadowy figure blames the defeat on sending the uncontrollable madman Frey into battle.
A man demands that those responsible be flayed alive for the disgrace they brought to the Empire.
A mouth yells that they must demonstrate the Empire's absolute terror to those who defy them.
A pale hand with sharp black nails reaches for a red flower, promising despair to enemies. Petals fall as a threat is issued toward anyone opposing the Empire's might.
A purple-haired woman with red eyes and a dragon behind her promises the terror of death.
Smoke billows from the industrial chimneys of the sprawling artisan city.
Inside the forge, the apprentice expresses shock that Uncle Teo accepted a commission for Skeleton.
Skeleton explains that despite a rough first impression, the Master Smith eventually agreed to the task.
Harrier is amazed by the news, while Skeleton wonders why the Smith's reputation is so extreme.
The apprentice explains that Teo ranks among the most unique and highly skilled artisans in the world.
The youth notes that while novices produce mass goods, masters like Teo rarely create anything at all.
A heavy clang rings out as a blacksmith shapes white-hot steel on the anvil.
Teo works as the narrator explains his eccentric nature and refusal to take commissions on a whim.
Harrier considers the commission a great honor, though the apprentice calls her just as odd as Teo.
Teo remarks that looking down on artisans is the mark of a fool lacking common sense.
The smith explains that true warriors know smiths and adventurers are inseparable partners.
A hand firmly grips the hilt of a well-crafted blade.
Harrier smiles with deep satisfaction while examining her weapon.
Skeleton declares his trust in the skill and integrity of the artisans on this street.
The apprentice appreciates the sentiment but reminds the warrior to trust in his own strength.
Teo observes that the user's actions determine whether a weapon functions as a sword or spear.
Watching Skeleton, Teo notes that despite his appearance, the warrior is clearly no villain.
The Master Smith encourages Skeleton to have confidence and trust in himself more than he knows.
Skeleton reflects on the deep necessity of discovering his true identity.
The apprentice offers a respectful farewell as the skeletal warrior prepares to depart.
A sudden wham sounds as Freya slams his hand down to get the master's attention.
Facing Skeleton, the red-haired Frey loudly addresses him as Master.
Frey requests a sparring match to test their progress after their long journey. The group arrives at the rocky, desolate expanse of the Ice Cannon Mine.
Frey readies a wooden practice sword and thanks Skeleton for accepting the sudden challenge. Skeleton appears flustered and caught off guard by the intensity of the request.
Harrier explains that combat is about making others understand through the heart rather than words.
Harrier, lounging on the rocks, advises Skeleton to think carefully during the upcoming spar.
Frey recalls their previous spar in the northern mountains as they prepare to begin.
Frey warns Harrier not to interfere, to which she lazily agrees with a wave. Harrier teases that fighting a weakened warrior wouldn't be fun and tells them to get ready.
A sharp ready sounds as the two opponents lock eyes in total focus.
A loud begin echoes as Frey lunges forward with surprising speed.
Harrier observes that the youngster's instantaneous speed has improved significantly. Skeleton acknowledges that Harrier has also grown considerably since they met in Libret Village.
A sharp clack sounds as their wooden swords collide in a rapid exchange. A quick swish sounds as Skeleton dodges a powerful lateral strike.
The two warriors clash in the dirt, the intensity of their sparring match rising. Frey lunges forward as a quick swish sounds from his wooden practice blade.
A loud clang rings out as their practice swords collide in a shower of splinters. The two warriors exchange a rapid series of strikes amidst the rising dust of the arena. Skeleton lands a solid blow to Frey's midsection as a sharp groan escapes the youth.
The combatants reset their stances, eyeing each other warily before the next exchange.
Frey delivers a heavy strike that forces Skeleton to guard firmly against the impact.
A close look at Frey's bandaged wrist reveals the intense physical strain of the battle. Skeleton counters with a swift wooden thrust as a sudden swish sounds through the ab. Frey unleashes a powerful overhead swing as a heavy whoosh sounds. Skeleton nimbly dodges a low sweeping kick from the determined red-haired youth. Frey's orange eyes burn with fierce determination during the grueling exchange of blows.
A rapid series of strikes fills the air as Frey pushes his master to his limits.
Skeleton remains calm while blocking the relentless flurry of practice sword strikes. High-speed movement blurs the scene as the duel reaches its fever pitch. Skeleton's hooded face reveals nothing but cold focus during the demanding spar.
Frey maintains a fixed, unwavering gaze on his opponent's every subtle movement.
Skeleton observes his student's form with practiced, watchful eyes between strikes. A loud crack sounds as Frey's practice sword shatters against Skeleton's ironclad guard. Skeleton's armored hand clenches into a tight fist as he prepares to strike back. Their exchange continues with blistering speed as a quick thud sounds from a heavy footfall. Harrier kicks through a wooden barrier held by Skeleton as a sharp snap sounds.
Splinters scatter from Harrier's violent strike against the master's guard.
Skeleton catches Harrier's leg midair as a quick thud sounds during the clash.
Skeleton nimbly evades another wide strike from the red-haired female warrior.
A moment of genuine surprise crosses Skeleton's face at the speed of the assault.
Frey steps back into the fight, winding up his bandaged fist for a heavy poach.
Frey strikes with overwhelming dark energy as a massive boom echoes across the arena. Skeleton firmly catches the incoming heavy blow with his metal hand without flinching. Skeleton counters with sudden force, sending the red-haired youth flying backward.
A huge crash sounds as Frey impacts the rocky ground, sending up a massive cloud of dust. Lounging against the rocks, Harrier observes that the master countered an attack aimed at her landing and notes the move wasn't bad.
Skeleton gestures toward the massive dust cloud and asks if Harrier is all right after the powerful impact. Gripping a rock as he rises from the dust, Frey mutters that things are playing out as he expected. Standing amidst the lingering smoke, Frey claims Skeleton has gotten much weaker just as he suspected.
Frey points out that during their match, Skeleton only moved defensively instead of attacking. The youth notes the lack of feints or blind spot movements and asks why Skeleton won't face him properly.
Frey's eyes narrow intensely as he asks if Skeleton is going easy on him because he looks weak.
Skeleton laughs off the claim as a wild assumption, but Frey remains skeptical and asks if it's truly the case. Lying back on the rocky ground, Harrier agrees that Skeleton definitely held back during the spar.
Harrier smiles broadly, claiming that having fought him before, she knows his heart has grown weak.
Skeleton dismisses the claim as nonsense and offers to face Harrier instead, though Frey insists she is right.
Looking intense, Frey remarks that ever since Skeleton returned from Teos Forge yesterday, he has seemed lost in thought.
Frey asks if the words skeleton heard at the forge bother him that much.
Skeleton reflects on the underlying reason for the sudden request for a sparring match.
Clenching his fist, Frey declares that as warriors, this kind of combat communicates their feelings better than a table with cookies. Looking down with worry, Frey tells his master he is in a precarious state and might return to his old self.
Frey notes that while one can stray from the path, it's possible to find the way back just as he did himself. Shouting with fierce passion, Frey tells Skeleton he can return and that he is no longer alone.
Frey insists that regardless of his title, Skeleton remains himself, their master, and a warrior of the north named Edward Ben-Lyra.
Extending a hand toward his master, Frey vows to assist him in walking the righteous path as his loyal comrade.
A hand rests on the shoulder of the warrior's cloak as his disciple reminds him that his sword is meant to save lives, not take them.
Looking up at the red-haired youth, Skeleton hears him declare that he is a hero to millions and more.
The scene shifts to a vast shimmering nebula as the narrator describes a cold world where pitch-black darkness has descended.
A diverse group of warriors walks together through the starry void representing the starlight found in a fading worm.
A soft, rhythmic giggle sounds as Skeleton reflects on how truly lucky he is. Standing by the jagged rocks, Frey calls for the sparring match to restart and asks Harrier to attack with full intent.
Skeleton raises his bandaged hand, vowing to face his opponent with the respectful attitude he deserves.
A grin of pure excitement spreads across Frey's face as he shouts his enthusiastic agreement. Lounging against a boulder, the red-haired Harrier asks if he truly intends to respond with such seriousness.
A heavy rock cliffside looms as the warriors take their starting positions.
A steady, rhythmic step sounds as the combatants face off in the desolate arena.
Skeleton clenches his metal fist while the red-haired youth prepares for the next exchange.
A sharp scraping scree sounds as a loose stone slips from the edge of the cliff. A large fragment of the cliff face plunges toward the ground, falling directly between the two fighters.
A heavy, sudden thud sounds as the falling rock impacts the dry earth.
Two fists launch toward each other with blinding speed as the high-stakes sparring resumes.
A flurry of strikes fills the air with a rapid-fire to-tack sounds as the warriors trade blows.
Focusing intensely, Frey realizes that the situation has completely changed from just moments ago.
Skeleton transitions to an aggressive style, throwing a relentless barrage of punches that keep his student on the defensive.
Guarding closely, Frey notes his master's shift in style while he looks for a single opening to counter.
A chaotic whirlwind of movement blurs the scene as the warriors trade high-speed strikes.
Rapid staccato talk sounds echo as the exchange of blows reaches a fever pitch.
Skeleton's open palm lunges forward, seeking to breach his opponent's guard.
A sharp, heavy sounds as Skeleton's fist connects with Frey's midsection.
A pained groan escapes the red-haired youth as he feels the full weight of the strike.
Moving with sudden agility, Skeleton dives low to sweep his opponent's feet.
Frey tenses up, firmly rooting himself to withstand the master's overwhelming pressure.
The sparring match becomes a blur of dynamic motion and expertly traded blows.
Honestly, they're moving so fast they might accidentally travel back to last Tuesday.
A quick, sharp tack sounds as a hand reaches out to seize the opponent.
Skeleton firmly grips Frey's shoulder, controlling the momentum of their struggle.
A massive, echoing boom sounds as Frey tackles the skeletal warrior into the cliff face. A gritty, scraping sound follows as feet dig into the dirt to stabilize the impact.
Harrier observes that the feint was a clever way to search for a counter, but considers the wrestling move a mistake.
A dark silhouette of the female warrior looms as she calls the outcome a shame.
A fierce, guttural roar sounds as the red-haired youth pours all his strength into the grapple.
Speedlines streak across the panel as the force of the collision vibrates through the air.
A thunderous, ground-shaking boom echoes as the impact shatters a section of the rocky cliff.
Looking up at the crumbling rock, Skeleton realizes the strategy was to hit this specific spot to trigger a landslide.
As massive boulders fall from above, Skeleton understands the tackle was meant to pin him in the path of the rocks.
A deafening, chaotic crash sounds as the cliffside gives way, burying the area in rubble.
Crossed arms block the descending debris as the warrior braces against the crushing rate.
A powerful, heavy wham sounds as a decisive kick is delivered through the rising dust.
Skeleton admits that the strategy of using falling rocks as a lure was quite interesting, while Harrier watches from her perch.
Shrouded in dust, the speaker notes the difficulty of designating exactly where the rocks would land during the maneuver.
A hand suddenly surges through the haze, grabbing the opponent by the neck.
Skeleton holds the red-haired youth firmly, telling him that his biggest mistake was the choice of opponent.
Looking down at his bandaged foot on the cracked earth, Frey admits his defeat.
Standing amidst the ruins, Frey raises his hands and declares his complete loss while Harrier hums in amusement.
Thanking Harrier for the refresh, Frey praises the Master's combat sense while Skeleton hopes it was a good warm-up. Skeleton tells Harrier she has grown strong, noting her progress since their meeting at the Northern Guild.
Frey gratefully acknowledges his master's words.
Humming, Harrier notes Skeleton perked up and asks for her turn while he questions her.
Harrier claims Skeleton is depressed, but he stays silent as Frey dismisses the matter.
Harrier claims that regardless of his title or appearance, the Master's actions remain the same. An ominous presence radiates from Skeleton. Recalling their tied record, Skeleton prepares for another round while Frey reacts with shock.
Cracking his knuckles, Skeleton suggests a best-of-3 match to settle their score.
Harrier laughs at fair rules on battlefields. Harrier declares victory belongs to survivors.
Frey cries out for them as a sop. Massive iron pillars descend from the both.
A thunderous boom echoes during impact. Skeleton wonders why pillars are flatting.
A purple-haired woman investigates the noise and asks what they are doing.
Standing on a pillar, the purple-haired woman yells about the mine and screams in rage.